Foggy glasses.
Order, are we ready?
We are ready, Mayor.
Mayor Finkel, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the June 1st, 2021 City Commission meeting. Before we get underway, I'll ask Porter O'Neill, our Director of Communications, to say a few words about the conduct of the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I just want to share some housekeeping items for this virtual meeting. This meeting is being broadcast and recorded on the City of Lawrence YouTube channel. The public chat function is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. When you are not participating in the meeting, please mute your microphone. When you are participating in the meeting, please keep your video on. When you are not participating in the meeting, please turn your video off. You will still be able to hear the meeting. You can turn your video back on when you are participating. Turning your video off when you are not participating allows the active meeting participants to be seen on the screen. If you have any trouble, please send me a chat. The city reserves the right to mute microphones and/or turn off people's video to minimize distractions. Please remember to state your name every time you speak for the benefit of those listening remotely. And now I'll turn the meeting back to Mayor Finkeldye.
Mayor Finkel, thank you, Porter. I'll now take roll call. Vice Mayor Shipley.
Here.
Commissioner Ananda.
Here.
Commissioner Lawson.
Here.
Commissioner Bully.
Here.
And I am Mayor Finkeldye. I am present as well. And we'll now go ahead and have Sherry Wiedemann, our city clerk, give us some information about the conduct of the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to provide a few procedural reminders for the virtual meeting. Commissioners, please remember to state your name and title each time you speak. Mayor, after a motion is made and seconded, please call on commissioners individually to provide their vote. Then make sure you announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. City staff, please remember to state your name and title each time you speak. When the mayor calls for public comment on an item, individuals participating via Zoom should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. The raise hand function may appear in different places on your Zoom menu, depending on the device you are using and which version of Zoom you have. Individuals will be called upon by name in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. When you are called on, please unmute and state your name, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. When the mayor calls for in-person public comment, individuals should raise their hand to indicate they wish to speak. Staff present will direct you to the podium to speak, following social distancing and safety protocols. Please state your name before speaking, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Mayor Finkeldye, thank you, Sherry. The first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. The City Commission reserves the right to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during the meeting. Would any commissioner like to change the agenda, or I'd look for a motion to approve it?
This is Commissioner Ananda. I move to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Larson, second.
Mayor Finkeldye, there's a motion by Commissioner Ananda, a second by Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Ananda?
Aye.
Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Finkeldye? Aye, passes 5-0. The next item on the agenda is to make our proclamations. We have 2 proclamations tonight. The first is to proclaim the month of June 2021 as PTSD Awareness Month. I am not sure if anyone's here to speak on that. I'm not sure if Debbie White is here. If not, I'll just go ahead and read the proclamation. Whereas June has been declared as PTSD Awareness Month each year around the world, and whereas for centuries we have recognized post-traumatic stress disorder, and whereas PTSD can affect all ages, children through seniors, and whereas treatment for PTSD is available, and whereas it is up to each of us to know that PTSD assessment form is a major tool to seek medical assistance, And whereas PTSD Awareness Month urges all to seek help for those who may have PTSD requiring medical assistance. Now therefore, I, Brad Finkeldye, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2021 as PTSD Awareness Month and encourage the residents of Lawrence to actively learn about PTSD assessment form written by the Center for PTSD Research as a tool to assist those affected by PTSD and to obtain medical assistance. Obviously a very important topic, and happy to proclaim June PTSD Month. Our second proclamation is to proclaim the first Friday of June, June 4th, to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And I believe Lena Carter-Brooke is here to say a few words before I read the proclamation.
Yes, I am. My name is Lena Carter-Brooke, and I am a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I want to thank Mayor Finkeldye and the rest of the Lawrence City Commission and accept the proclamation on behalf of our local Douglas County Moms Demand Action group. On January 21st, 2013, Hadia Pendleton, a high school student from the south side of Chicago, marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade. 1 week later, she was shot and killed on a playground in Chicago. Soon after this tragedy, Hadia's childhood friends decided to commemorate her life by wearing orange, the color hunters wear in the woods to protect themselves and others. The Wear Orange event grew from this effort and officially originated on June 2nd, 2015, what would have been Hadia's 18th birthday. Now it is observed nationally on the first Friday in June and the following weekend each year. This year, National Gun Violence Awareness Day will be this Friday, June 4th, followed by Wear Orange Weekend, June 5th and 6th. Wear Orange is a non-political, non-partisan campaign which amplifies awareness for gun violence prevention and honors the survivors of gun violence. While we begin to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, a variety of Wear Orange virtual events will take place in every state and Washington, D.C., bringing together gun violence survivors, students, families, elected officials, community leaders, gun violence prevention activists and volunteers, faith leaders, business partners, and more. People who believe we can and must solve the problem of gun violence in America. We will stand together virtually in a bold statement of resilience and fortitude as we advance our efforts. Buildings, landmarks, stadiums, and arenas across the nation will be lit orange this weekend, including our own Watkins Museum in downtown Lawrence. We encourage everyone in Douglas County to wear orange throughout the weekend. We will have several local events in which people can participate. At 10 o'clock this Friday morning, Douglas County Moms Demand Action volunteers will be collecting much needed toiletries, school supplies, cleaning supplies, and other items, please, all new, not used, for Willow Domestic Violence Center at the South Park Playground between 11th and 13th Streets on the west side of Mass, so across from the gazebo. That's 1141 Massachusetts. When you bring your donations to the park, please join us in tying an orange ribbon on a tree to remember victims and survivors of gun violence. Our Kansas Wear Orange virtual event will be at 9 o'clock this Saturday morning and will last about an hour. You can get details about these events by texting the word orange to 64433. You'll need to fill out a registration to get the Zoom link to join us for the Saturday virtual event. Thank you so much.
Lena, thank you very much. And I will go ahead and read the proclamation. Whereas every day, more than 100 Americans are killed by gun violence, alongside more than 230 who are shot and wounded. And on average, there are more than 15,000 gun homicides every year. And whereas Kansas has 403 gun deaths every year, with a rate of 13.7 deaths per 100,000 people. Kansas has the 22nd highest rate of gun deaths in the U.S. And whereas cities across the nation, including Lawrence, are working to end the senseless violence with evidence-based solutions, and whereas protecting public safety in the communities they serve is a mayor's highest responsibility, and whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories. And whereas gun violence prevention is more important than ever as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to exacerbate gun violence after more than a year of increased gun sales, increased calls to suicide and domestic violence hotlines, and an increase in city gun violence. And whereas anyone can join this campaign by pledging to wear orange on June 4th, 2021 to help raise awareness about gun violence. Whereas by wearing orange on June 4th, 2021, Americans will raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors, and renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can do to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children safe. Now, therefore, I, Brad Finkeldye, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby proclaim June 4th, 2021 as National Gun Violence Awareness Day and encourage all citizens to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor the value of human lives. Thank you very much. And thank you for doing this and all that you do. I follow a few of you on Facebook, so I know you do a lot of other activities throughout the year, including during the legislative session. So appreciate all your efforts in keeping our community safe. Thank you all for being here. Okay, with that, we'll move to the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that has been pulled off the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Are there any items the commissioners would like to pull off the consent agenda? Seeing none, if any member of the public would like to pull an item off the consent agenda, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, or if you're present at City Hall, you can let Sherry know.
This is Sherry Reederman, City Clerk. Mayor, no one has indicated they have an item they wish to pull.
Sherry, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that. Sherry Reederman, City Clerk. No one has indicated they have an item to pull.
Mayor Finkeldye, thank you, Sherry. I look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Nanda, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Larson, second.
Mayor Finkeldye, there's a motion by Commissioner Ananda, a second by Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Ananda?
Aye.
Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Finkeldye, aye. Consent agenda passes 5-0. We'll now move to public comment. The public is allowed to speak on items or issues that are not scheduled for discussion on the agenda. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Individuals should address all comments and questions to the commission. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. If any member of the public would like to make general public comment about something not on the agenda, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature. Or if you're present at City Hall, let Sherry know and she'll call upon you.
Chris Flowers.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers, I guess, city commission candidate now, but I'm here because of the government, the study task force, I guess. Last week I went to, I guess, their final meeting, and it was a bit late, but I came up with this idea. They're talking about going strictly to districts and having one mayor, and I'm kind of against that. I don't think that's really fair for renters. But the point I brought up kind of late is that it's the question, do you have to live in the district to run for it? That I presented this idea because what it does it allows renters flexibility to move around and not be, because we know there's an affordable housing issue and we've talked about that. And if we're telling our city employees, you don't have to live in Lawrence because of the housing availability and how it might be hard to get housing affordable for you, won't it be hard to have renters commit to 4 years of living at in their district, when if we go to 6 districts, that's what, like 1/6 of Lawrence. If you want to move and you're a renter, you're going to have to find a place you can afford, and you're only going to have 1/6 of the city, to find that. And also, I've been thinking more about it, like what about when it comes to domestic violence issues? If there's someone who's in an abusive relationship and they are on city commission, are they going to have to make the decision, do I stay where I live in order to serve on commission, or can I move and still be allowed to represent the district? Because really, I don't think you should have to live in the district to represent it. That's just someone's ideas that you have to live there in order to represent it. Let the residents decide who they want representing them. And I don't think the city task force came up with, I don't think they made a decision about you have to live there. So when it comes up to city, I'm gonna be talking about this. So I hope you guys start thinking, do you have to live in the district to represent it? And also, I think we need to do some kind of Lawrence listens, because some of this stuff is up to like what people's values are, but do we actually know what the citizens' values are when it comes to what they want in the government if we don't ask them? I mean, we're just doing a study task force, and we're going to make decisions about what Lawrence wants based on that without asking the people of Lawrence. I mean, we've asked them on other stuff, so thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to provide general public comment? That's all the comment, Mayor.
Mayor Finkel, I thank you. Sherry? We'll now move to the regular agenda items. Regular agenda item 1 is to conduct a public hearing regarding the structure located at 1616 Main Street. Brian, do you get to present this?
Yes, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Brian Jimenez, Code Enforcement Manager for the City of Lawrence. Mayor, it's actually 616 Main Street, not 1616. Just want to clarify that. Tonight before you, you have Resolution 7369. To give you a little bit of background, back on April 6th, a couple months ago, you adopted Resolution 7365 on the consent agenda to set the public hearing date for tonight regarding the dilapidated structure on Main Street. In accordance with Kansas statute, after that resolution was adopted by the commission for 2 consecutive weeks on April 10th and April 17th, that resolution was published in the local newspaper. I then, per state statute, mailed that resolution to the owner of record, Miss Patricia Long, on Monday, April 12th at her last known address, which is also 616 Main Street. So we complied with the publication and notification requirements of state statute. To give you a little bit more background, that was on the April 6th agenda. We have had many code cases on this property in the last several years. Most of those were for mowing of weeds and grass on the property. On August 10th of last year, 2020, we received a complaint about the overall condition of the property. There's also another resolution right after this that I will sort of combine tonight for the sake of time, but we'll talk about the vehicle as well here in a little bit. So in August of last year, we had a complaint. We investigated. We sent notice to the property owner, I believe, on April 12th or 13th. August 12th or 13th. We never heard a response from Ms. Long. It's a little bit odd in this case, in the fact that we don't have any address for the owner. We believe she lives here in Lawrence, but we don't have any idea where. So we have had no response. So once spring and early summer came around, actually just recently as a couple weeks ago on May 19th, we executed an administrative search warrant to document the full scope of deterioration of the house. And those pictures are attached within this agenda item. I think the pictures speak for themselves. We didn't have any idea how bad the property was until we went inside. And in my opinion, this house is probably not a financially feasible rehab just due to the extent of the deterioration. In my opinion, this would probably be a demolition for whoever may own it, either by the current owner of record or someone else that owns the property down the line. The resolution tonight is, if you adopt that resolution at our recommendation, that would basically give the property owner until July 1, 2021 to either do one of two things. The first thing would be obviously to get a building permit and start or begin a extensive rehabilitation of the house. And the second option would be obviously to demolish the house in its entirety and have a code compliant vacant lot. I'll share my screen now. Here's the property in question. I hope everyone can see that. Please let me know if you don't. This house is on the east side of Main Street, 600 block. It's a one-story on a walk-down cellar foundation. There's the west elevation there. The vehicle that we'll talk about shortly after this resolution consideration is a Ford Taurus. As you can see, it's got a broken out rear window, flat tires. It's got expired tags. By the definition of inoperable vehicle in the city code, property maintenance code, this meets that code. Basically, to have a vehicle on private property, you need to have it licensed through the state that it's issued, and it needs to function its full capacities of an automobile, which is obviously being licensed to drive on the street and being operable to drive on the street. Looking at the porch, this is a view straight west elevation. This part of the ceiling of the porch has begun to collapse just left of the front door. The second picture here is looking straight north. This is the porch roof. You can see deterioration at the roof line, leaning there significantly. There's the downstairs walk down cellar that I mentioned just a minute ago. This other south elevation rear porch, this is most likely an addition at some point. You can see some of the wall is failing. The floor assembly for this porch is also failing. These next pictures are us going inside the house. This is the door on the south side, right off that porch that I just showed you above. Here's the bathroom on the right of that picture. We were a little shocked because you cannot see this hole from the exterior. It was not visible. The entire roof assembly of this bathroom on the east side has collapsed, as well as the floor. There's a remnants of a toilet there. Here's a couple more pictures of the bathroom. It's in complete disarray. It's obviously not been used for a very long time. Going into the living room, here's another portion of the roof that's collapsed. It's obviously easy to say that the roof has failed in numerous spots. It was difficult to walk among this area inside just due to the amount of personal belongings and trash and debris. It's almost as if someone piled up trash in every room and just simply walked away from this. Here's another picture of looking towards the south of the kitchen. In the upper left-hand corner, the roof has, the ceiling has given away. These are two bedrooms. You can just see the amount of personal belongings that are left in the house on the floor, strewn about on the doors. These are what the house looked like back in March. It hasn't changed any. I won't go through all of these, but you can see that the condition is pretty bad. So with that, I'll stand for questions if you have any. We recommend the adoption of the resolution that will set the motion in play where the owner will either need to repair the structure or demolish it. If the owner failed to act, we would then take the lead in that, and we would go through the demolition process and obtain bids, and then we would demolish the house and bill the owner. And then according to state statute, if the owner failed to pay us in return, we would then apply a tax assessment to the property taxes on this property.
Mayor Finkel, I thank you. Brian, any commissioners have questions for Brian?
Vice Mayor Shipley. Sorry, Brian still got his screen up. Brian, thank you. I know this is a very difficult part of your job and watching you the last 6 or so years. In that time, I've never seen one come that someone didn't respond to you and even, some arrangements be made. And I'm a little concerned about that. I mean, you've been doing this for many months, so maybe it's not that unusual. But one of my concerns is perhaps this person is deceased or is in care somewhere and simply has no knowledge of this. And while you have a great point that it does not seem very salvageable, the land still has value. So can you talk to me about the history of that, or your thoughts about why you haven't been able to find this person?
Sure. Brian Jimenez, Code Enforcement Manager. Great questions, Commissioner Shipley. A couple things that obviously I should point out. During our visits to the property, there is mail coming to that property. In fact, during our visits, sometimes the mailbox is completely full. We'll drive by a week or two later and the mailbox is empty. We also have a long-standing neighbor about 2 or 3 doors down. I talked to her a couple weeks ago, actually the day we did the search warrant. She's been in the neighborhood, I believe, since the mid 80s. And so she knows everyone in the neighborhood who's come and gone over that time. She is positive that Miss Long is alive here in Lawrence somewhere. And the reason she believes that is there was a handyman doing work on the house immediately to the south of this house. And that person somehow found her contact or whatever and asked her about buying the property. Of course, this is, third-hand knowledge, so I may not get it all right, but allegedly Miss Long told that person that she was not interested in selling the property to him. In addition, a few days after I spoke to this nice lady on the street during the search warrant, she called me and gave me an email address for Miss Long and said that somebody within the neighborhood found the email address and some document that was lying on the porch. As you can imagine, there's a lot of stuff that is probably falling in and out of that mailbox if someone's not checking the mail on a regular basis. We did send an email to the asking for contacting us based on that email that we were provided. We did not get any type of undeliverable message saying it was an invalid email, and we did not get a response back. And that was back, when we did the search warrant. I'm pretty confident that we just have an owner, for whatever reason, has not taken care of the property and is missing in action right now. And one more important thing, I don't know the date on this, my staff doesn't either. When we had a weed case on this several years ago, my staff happened to drive by to take a look at and found Miss Long actually at the property and spoke to her at that time. Unfortunately, we did not get any contact information for during that visit. Now, that's the information I have, and some of that's obviously very recently, as recent as 2 weeks ago. We will continue to search for her, and if these resolutions are adopted tonight, obviously we will send them back to the address. When we send something certified, we do get notification that whether that was claimed or unclaimed. I've received one property mailing that showed it was unclaimed. I have not received any notification from this property yet. So it could very easily be later this week or next week where I get notification whether that certified letter was claimed or not. So those are the comments I have for you regarding the whereabouts of the owner.
Mayor Finkel, thank you for that, Brian. Other questions from commissioners? This is a public hearing item, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If any member of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using your raise your hand feature, or if you're present, let Sherry know and she'll call upon you.
Chris Flowers.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers, and I was just wondering, I like to watch the show Hoarders, you know, I've seen that in the past, and I'm just wondering, has the city, I mean, I don't think this is just an issue of her ignoring stuff. I think it's an issue of hoarding. And I'm wondering, like, has the city reached out, like, trying to get her help to, like, Burton Ash to, because I think the problem might be a hoarding problem. And I don't like tearing down property. Like, if you watch Hoarders, usually the bad guy in the show is the city who's trying to, you know, take away the hoarders' property because they've let it go like what we're seeing in here. So I think the person needs like help with a hoarding issue. And I'd prefer we try to work on that before trying to demolish the house and remove the car. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on this item? That's all the comments, Mayor.
Mayor Finkel, I thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for comments or motions.
Vice Mayor Shipley, if I may, just one last eventuality. In the event that you never are able to contact the owner and it's demolished, so that incurs a cost that goes on to the tax bill, and then let's say you still never hear from them. Ultimately, does that end up at auction at the county? Is that how that would work if no one ever hears from this owner?
Brian, you're muted. Mayor Finkel.
Thank you. Brian Jimenez, Code Enforcement Manager for the city. I don't know exactly the process and protocol for when a sale goes on a property for failure to pay taxes. I think I checked the taxes on this, and they aren't overly delinquent if they are at all. That can be a several-year process. For example, I've seen properties where there may be 3 to 4 years of taxes not being paid, and we contact the county, and it may be a year or so out before that goes to sell. And then, of course, there's always a redemption right where the owner has the opportunity, or a mortgage company, to pay that outstanding tax bill, and then that sale will be terminated. Ultimately, if we had to apply it to the tax roll on this, and the property sold, that would be an outstanding lien that would need to be taken care of during the transaction process of the property changing hands.
Mayor Finkel, I actually did look that up because I was curious, and the taxes were paid through 2019. So, the 2020 taxes have not been paid, but under the statute, it's basically 3 years before they can start the process, and be the 4th year that would go to a sheriff's sale. So we're looking, and again, you know, this would be a lien on that property. So we'll probably still at least 2.5 years before we go to a property tax sale, assuming she at some point doesn't pay the 2019 taxes. I was curious as well. Other comments or motions?
This is Commissioner Nanda. I'd move that we adopt resolution number 7369.
Commissioner Larson, second.
Mayor Fingeldine, there's a motion by Commissioner Nanda, a second by Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Nanda?
Aye.
Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Fingeldine? Aye, passes 5-0. We'll now move to regular agenda item number 2, which is to consider a public hearing regarding the inoperable vehicle located at 616 Main Street. And Brian, I don't know if you have much more to say, but go ahead.
The only comment I would have is the resolution 7374. I won't go into the great detail of that, but it just basically, there's a violation of an inoperable vehicle. It's not currently licensed. It doesn't appear to be running. That person would need to show us that. It's got a broken out window and flat tires. I believe it's been there much longer than August of last year. I would just recommend that that you would adopt resolution 7374, and we would also have the same month time limit for that vehicle to be removed. If in fact we would unfortunately have to demolish the house, most, if not all, contractors would want that vehicle removed to be able to safely get in and demolish the house and remove the debris from the property. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mayor Fingeldine, thank you. Any questions for Brian? Seeing none, this is also a public hearing item, so I will open the public hearing. If any member of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, or let Sherry know if you're present.
There's no comment on this item, Mayor.
Mayor Fingeldine, thank you, Sherry. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for comments or motions.
This is Commissioner Nanda. I move that we adopt resolution number 7374.
Commissioner Larson, second.
Mayor Fingeldine, there's a motion by Commissioner Ananda, a second by Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Ananda?
Aye.
Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Fingeldine, aye, passes 5-0. We'll now move to regular agenda item number 3, which is to conduct a public hearing regarding the structure located at 1510 Wedgewood Drive. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. Brian Jimenez, Code Enforcement Manager for the City of Lawrence. This will follow the same exact process as our previous item. Unlike the last item, we know who the owner is located, and we have spoken to this individual numerous times over the last several years. I'll go into a little bit of detail of that. Tonight, you're looking at a single detached house on a slab foundation with a attached carport. It's located on the east side of the block at 1510 Wedgewood. We're asking consideration tonight for adopting resolution 7368, declaring the structure to be unsafe and dangerous and ordering the property owner to commence and complete substantial repairs or demolish the structure, but also by July 1, 2021. At your April 6th City Commission meeting, you adopted resolution 7364 that simply set this hearing date for tonight. We followed the exact same notification protocols for 616 Main. The resolution was published 2 times, April 10th and 17th in the Lawrence Journal World. A copy of that resolution was certified mailed to William Lehman, owner of record, on Monday, April 12th, to his last known address and to comply with the state statutes. On the April 6th agenda item, I gave you a very lengthy chronology of what we dealt with on this property. I will hit the highlights. In October of 2017 is when we first got started with this property, a long time ago. We started to work with Mr. Lehman to try to get results. There was notices and orders to correct violations. There was written appeal submitted by him and then later withdrawn. He eventually did get a building permit to do work on the property in May of 2018. That permit was extended 180 days as code permits. It was eventually closed out for lack of activity. Basically, when you get a building permit, at the discretion of our staff, our plan review staff and permit technicians, we can extend permits, and we do that very commonly. This is not a odd event by any stretch. But what happens is if you don't do any type of work that requires inspections, we will close that permit out, and that's what happened in 2019. We continue to work with Mr. Lehman into late 2019. He recontacted our plan review staff in November of 2019 to try to get a new building permit application rolling through our system. That communication with our plan review continued, but nothing happened. There were some requirements that weren't met. And in July of last summer, our plan review staff notified him that submittal of a building permit, not approval, just the submittal, was basically closed out for lack of activity to present the required documents that we needed to be given to issue that permit. There is a owner occupant provision in our building code that allows an owner to act as their own contractor, and they sign an agreement with us. They are supposed to live within that structure for 1 year after completion of occupancy. So that would have been required for Mr. Lehman on the first and second building permit application process. With that lack of completion of anything that needed to be done for the building permit, last September, we completed a administrative search warrant to also go look at that property. Excuse me, I need some water. So we went in September of last year and completed an administrative search warrant. I will pull those pictures up and share those with you. Hope everyone can see that. This is the property. This is looking at the streetscape, looking directly east. As you will see, there's 4 vehicles in the driveway / yard that are not licensed, currently registered through the state of Kansas or another state. They've been in that same location since November of 19 and probably a little bit longer than that. The next picture here is showing you the siding has been removed. All windows have been removed. The front door has been removed. And this situation's been like this going on 4 years coming this October. Here's a little bit closer view of the west side. You can see there's a hole there. This is obviously this exterior wall sheathing is not meant to be permanent. I mean, you apply a wall covering over this and paint it and all that good stuff. So this is just something that would be underneath that you would obviously never see. This here is the south wall. There's the studs. Most of these houses, I think, were built in the 50s in the same type of construction. You probably wouldn't see this type of construction in today's world. Insulation would be obviously applied on this side of the wall. Going to the backyard, there's the vehicles that we'll talk about in a second, so I'll skip over that. Here's the east wall of the house. If you zoom in, you can see extreme soffit deterioration, basically just left of this window here, all the way to the northeast corner of the house. And if you look real close, you can even see some of the roof assembly, wood has been rotted near the fascia. Here's the inside of the house, and basically the house has just been gutted. I think Mr. Lehman had good intentions to rehab the house, but we could never get him on course to complete anything. So this is looking at where the front door would be. So this is looking at the west wall of the house. This is a bedroom where it appears he's just using it for some type of personal storage. This is where the living room would be. This is looking That wall there that's sheetrocked is actually the south wall. You can see daylight coming in on the right, which is the west wall of the front of the house. There's miscellaneous tools and machinery stored there. Just another bedroom full of storage. Another bedroom. Basically, there are 3 bedrooms on the east side of the house, and they're just all full of what appears to be personal storage. Mechanical probably needs to be updated. Here's where the kitchen would be. As you can see, it's gutted. You have electrical wiring just hanging here. There are no current services there. Electrical, water, and I believe gas have obviously all been terminated for several years. Here's the bathroom, also in a state of disrepair. Picture of the tub. Here's the view from the street looking directly to the east. Here's a closer picture of the west wall. Here's another view looking basically towards the south. As you can see, these boards are starting to cup and weather because they're not meant to be outside for many years without any type of permanent wall coverings and paint. Another view of the south wall. I think you get the picture. Here's the north wall,
yeah.
which basically this top part is the carport that extends out. So basically every wall of the exterior is not weather protected with any type of siding. There are a couple windows here, unlike the front of the house. Here's the rear. As you can see, any gaps there of siding is basically it's rotted and it's fallen off. You can see water stains from just being rained on or snowed on over the course of time. Another good view of the rotted roof members on the ends there exposed to the elements. Just another view there. Here's the carport that's attached to the house. You can see up here by the gutter's off. That's not a huge concern, but obviously all the trim in the framing of the carport is collapsing and falling down. The posts are severely rotted at the base of the carport floor. Just another good view of the rotted soffit on the east side of the house. And then, of course, I'll talk about the vehicles when we look at the resolution number 7374. All these vehicles do not have tags, and I'm pretty confident they have not moved at least since November of 2019. The pictures that I took in early May show the exact location of the cars. And obviously the ones in the back, all these cars would have to be moved for those in the back to be moved. Basically, city code requires any car parked in a rear yard to be on an approved surface, which is a driveway, concrete, asphalt. They're just parked in the yard, so that's a violation of code. And then, as we mentioned earlier on 616 Main, to be an operable vehicle, it has to be currently licensed through the state it's registered in, and it has to perform its function of driving down the street and being able to transport people. Just another picture of the cars, and these cars have been in the same exact location since at least November 19. Since we talked about taxes, property taxes, I don't know if Commissioner Finkeldye has looked at this property. Property taxes on this property have not been paid since 2014. And so there's a significant backlog of money owed to the county. We recently were in contact with the county last week. Mayor Finkeldye might have the right terminology for how they get to the point of a sheriff's sale, but that has already happened. And that sale will occur this summer. They do not know a date for us at this point, but it will be scheduled. So if that does happen, which is kind of unique, it doesn't happen very often when we're trying to improve a property, we would probably have to stay in close contact with the county and figure out the date. I probably don't want to have to tear down a house if it's in the process of going for sale. So we'll have to just sort of tiptoe around that. I think it's the first one I've had where they match up that close together. Now there also is the redemption period where the owner could pay the taxes in full and the sale would be terminated. But I thought that was important to tell you, because I think that shows you the totality of the circumstances here, where we have a very dilapidated house that's been stripped, 7 vehicles on the property in violation of city code that don't run, aren't licensed. And then on top of that, we have property taxes that have not been paid. And I think the county's probably a little behind because of the pandemic and so forth. But they did confirm late last week that this will go to sell at an undetermined time unless the property owner pays in full the taxes that are owed. And with that, I stand for questions. Thank you.
Although, Mayor Finkel, other questions for Brian on this matter? And I had looked at the taxes. I did see it was 5 years past due and going to sale, so. Seeing no questions, I will go ahead and open the public hearing. If any member of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, or let Sherry know if you're present at City Hall.
This is Sherry Reederman, City Clerk. Mayor, no one has indicated they wish to speak to this item, but I believe the property owner is on Zoom. I don't know if you wanted to ask him specifically if he wanted to provide comment. Okay, it looks like he has message that he has. So Mr. Lehman, you can go ahead and unmute and state your name and provide your comments.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I thought this was going to be, I was going to actually be present. I thought it was going to be later in the agenda, but I'm still ready to comment. The first thing is that in dealing with Mr. Jimenez is his lack of candor. His narrative in the April item left out some things, and he, at the very least, misstated. What he left out in his narrative in April, and the reason for this lateness of this comment is I wasn't aware of this going on. Sorry, I don't read the Journal World, the legal notices. I did not receive the documents. And then a friend who does follow the city commission asked me about the address, and that's how I found out about it. So what he does leave out is that he actually brought this before the municipal court, and the exact same items and the comments are it's not in this particular case. I wouldn't necessarily say a charge, but the exact same items that are before you now, he brought before the Lawrence Municipal Court, and on 5/20/19, I was found not guilty. And so I find it interesting that after having lost in a court of law, and you can come to your own conclusions on why the city prosecutor did not refile charges. But there weren't. And so I prevailed in the case then. And one of the things that he glosses over is when he talks about the condition of the building, each time when I had the building permit, I did do work on it. As you can see, for example, the bathtub was going to be removed, and that steps were being taken, and each time working through it. I had other issues that came up in dealing with family members and illness, and then we had COVID. I did submit another building permit, as it was mentioned. It was kicked out because of the being within the historical environments of the cemetery. And so that was another item that I had to figure out how to deal with that. So the other item is, so already you can call it whatever you want. I call it lying through omission of leaving out the fact that he lost in municipal court on the very same items. There is electrical service. I pay the bill every month for electrical service, gas service, and water service. And so whether or not they are to the building is not relevant. In other words, there is water service. If you're working on a building, you turn the water off so that you don't have a problem with leaks. If you're working on the electrical or you're going to work on the electrical, you don't have the electrical to the building, you have it turned off. But it is still hooked up and the service is active. So those are the main things is, regardless of what happens here, I'm still going to go ahead and get a building permit. I was down there at the city today. I requested a copy of all the information in the file. Normally it's provided to you immediately or near immediately copying, but the person at the front desk after checking was told now I had to do an information request and submit that and wait, and that could take a couple of weeks. So that's fine. Like I said, I'm still going to be filing a building permit. So my only concern is that of dealing with Mr. Jimenez and his, as I said before, he, at the very least, lying through omission, not talking about the court case, dealing with him. My concern is, and I've actually had that conversation with other staffers, of him trying to interfere with me receiving a building permit, to the point where one staffer said that they had to tell him to just deal with his department. They would handle the permits. So my only concern is the July 31st date for a cutoff, with waiting for the permits. If the permit process is extended for 3 or 4 weeks, then there's no time. That's my only concern. As far as regarding redoing the building now, the issue with the person being ill, they're no longer here. So I have, 100% of my attention to deal with this now. That's all I have for a comment.
Mayor Finkel, I thank you for those comments. Sherry, are there any other speakers?
No, Mayor.
Mayor Finkel, other questions?
Mayor Finkeldie, Brian
Yeah.
Jimenez, could I respond to his comment about this court case?
I was about to ask you that if no one else did. So yes, please.
His statement is absolutely undeniably incorrect. We did go to court on 2 of his property, well, one on 1511 Lindenwood. The judge dismissed that case solely for the reason the way the amendments to the code were attached to the property maintenance code book in the city clerk's office. It had nothing to do whether the facts of the case, whether he was guilty or not. In fact, the Judge Miller, at the conclusion of that, told Mr. Lehman that if we did refile charges against him, he would be found guilty in the court as charged. It was simply because the amendments to the property maintenance code in the city clerk's office, they were not permanently affixed to that book. They were just stuck in the book, and he made that ruling that did not comply with code. And that was the ruling. It had nothing to do with whether the property was in violation of any city codes regarding deterioration, uninhabitable, et cetera. It was simply based on, how the amendments were attached to the code. And that's how that went down.
Mayor Finkel, are you saying was on a different property?
That was on 1511 Lindenwood, and therefore, since he was looking at the code and we had 2 cases going, we simply dismissed the other case because we would have lost it on that technicality. So we dropped that case. It had nothing to do whether there were code violations to the property itself. It was simply how the code book was presented to Mr. Lehman when he requested to view it at the city clerk's office.
Mayor Finkel, so there was 2 cases. One was found because of that technicality. The other one was dismissed on 1510. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Comments?
Yeah, Commissioner Larson, Brian, could you address Mr. Lehman's concern about getting a building permit or not being able to get a building permit?
That, in my opinion, that is a unfair statement trying to make me look to be someone I'm not. I've never butted in. It's not my job to deny a building permit or tell any of my staff or coworkers to deny the permit. I think all I can say to that is that did not happen. And I think if you look at the duration that this property has been in this condition, I've been lenient. I've not filed charges again. I just simply want Mr. Lehman to improve his property. Nothing more, nothing less. I have no personal vendetta against Mr. Lehman. other than the fact that he's consumed a extraordinary amount of our time and resources in trying to get this property in compliance.
Mayor Fingeldine, other questions or comments? And Brian, as I understand the resolution, if he does begin working on the project by July 1st, he gets that building permit, and he'll be allowed to continue to do that towards completion?
Well, that Brian Jimenez, Code Enforcement Manager for the city, that's a good question. I always put a month date in those resolutions. With you as the governing body have the ability to make that date whatever you think is relevant. If you want to give him 60 days to do this, I don't have a problem with that, but I have to put a date in there, somehow. Another important thing is we haven't heard from Mr. Lehman since last fall. He comes to our office today to start asking for records on the day of the meeting. To me, that's problematic because he's had months beforehand to come and start this process. I know our staff is seasoned in the building permit side. Our plan review staff, one's an architect, one's been a senior plans examiner for many years. They are fair. They know what they require for a building permit to be issued. I don't think in any way, shape, or form they are out. They're overreaching their code requirements. It always comes down to the question for me is, after almost 4 years of this property being this way, does the property owner have the ability and capacity to get a building permit, and not only get a building permit, but then work towards a successful rehabilitation? The worst case scenario for us is the building permit's issued, and then we're sitting with no activity again, and then we have to determine whether we want to extend it for another 180 days, or worse, just terminate it and let it expire because Mr. Lehman didn't take any action.
Mayor Fingeldine, I guess to clarify, I understand the resolution say he must commence work by July 1st, and then he must, quote, diligently prosecute the same until the work is completed and the premises is made safe and secure. So it's really a two-part process. He has to start the work and then continue to prosecute it. Is that your understanding?
Brian Jimenez, Code Enforcement Manager. Yes, that's correct. We want it to start, but we also want it to move towards completion, continuous improvement.
Mayor Fingeldine, thank you for those clarifications. Other questions or comments? Motions?
Mayor, Mr. Lehman is requesting to respond. I just didn't know if you could, since you can't see his chat, I wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Sherry. Mr. Lehman, you can go ahead, since this is about your property, you can go ahead and respond.
Okay. Again, Mr. Jimenez, at the very least, misstated. I literally have the documents myself that from the court for 1510 Wedgwood, not guilty. They chose to dismiss the Lindenwood address after losing this. He says that the reason that it was dismissed was because the item was not attached to the code, which means they did not do their job. He did not do his job. He was not in compliance with the ordinance. And not only that, the judge ruled that the ordinance was not in effect from the moment that it was passed until the clerk finally attached the ordinance to it, which should have been done from his office to make sure that it was valid. So that means anything that occurred in that time period was not a violation. That's part of the reason Mr. Jimenez was annoyed, and because he was embarrassed that he did not do his job, his duty. And so if you look at the property over the period of time, work was being done. And I think that's obvious. And he actually stated it himself, although he didn't intend to, that work was being done, just not at the speed that he thought it should have been done at the time. And as I stated, and I'm not going to go into the specifics, I was dealing with the other things at the time. Those are no longer an issue. And so I'm perfectly willing to work on it, and I don't have a problem. I do have a concern, although he says he doesn't have any effect on it. I was standing there speaking to the historical preservation person when he literally ran down the hall, interjected in the middle of our conversation, and started yelling at me, literally, for appealing it. So he says that, and he's able to maintain his composure now, but he doesn't when he's talking with me usually. And so I do agree he's wasted an inordinate amount of time on this, that he could have been doing rental property inspections so we don't have people dying because they don't have smoke detectors. So that's all I have to say. With the addition is, if you guys want to do it for 60 days, that's fine. At the end of 60 days, if I haven't done anything, you can go ahead and, I'm not giving you permission. I'm just saying, go ahead and bulldoze it down. I don't have an issue with that.
Mayor Finkelstein, thank you.
Thank you.
Bring it back to the commission for comments or motions.
This is Commissioner Nanda. I would be amenable to extending it to 60 days, so that would be August 1st, presumably. Would other commissioners be okay with that? I suppose I could just make a motion.
This is Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk. Before you do that, Commissioner Ananda, Mayor, can I just confirm that I'm sorry, because I know we let Mr. Lehman talk, that the public hearing was closed.
Mayor Finkelstein, thank you for that, Sherry. We had no one else wishing to speak, correct?
That's right.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and then bring the matter back. And Commissioner Ananda.
This is Commissioner Nanda. I would move that we adopt resolution number 7368 with the extension of 60 days rather than 30 days.
Mayor Finkelstein, is there a second? Seeing none, I would say that dies for lack of the second. Would there be another motion to be made?
Commissioner Larson, I move that we adopt resolution number 7368 as written. 7368, I'm sorry, as written.
This is Commissioner Bowley, second.
Mayor Finkelstein, there's a motion by Commissioner Lawson, a second by Commissioner Bowley. Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Ananda?
Aye.
Mayor Finkelstein, aye. Passes 5-0. We'll now move to agenda item number 4, which is related, conduct a public hearing regarding the unlicensed and inoperable vehicles located at 1510 Wedgewood Drive. Brian, go ahead.
Brian Jimenez, Code Enforcement Manager for the city. I don't have much to say on this one, as I spoke to the vehicles that are on the property. There are currently 7 vehicles there. There are 2 BMWs, a Toyota, and a Ford F-150 in the front yard, a Toyota Celica, a Honda, and a Chevy SUV, all white vehicles in the rear yard. City code. We've talked to Mr. Lehman about this many times over the last several years. City code requires any vehicles parked in the rear yard to be on approved surface, constructed in compliance with city code standards. Typically, that's asphalt or concrete. They're just parked in the yard. The vehicles in the front yard need to be all licensed and shown to be operable. Those 4 vehicles have been parked in the same location as well. I ask that you consider adopting Resolution 7374, giving Mr. Lehman a month to remove the vehicles off the property, or we will abate those violations. That's all I have. I stand for questions. Thank you.
Mayor Finkelstein, any questions for Brian?
Commissioner Larson, did I hear him correctly that this is resolution 774, or is it? I thought it should be 7371.
Excuse me, I misspoke. 7371.
Commissioner Larson, thank you.
Mayor Finkel, aye. I will go ahead and open the public hearing. And Mr. Lehman, since this is your property, I'll let you speak first and then open it up to other public comment.
Okay, am I, yeah, I'm unmuted now. Okay, yeah, for that one, I don't have a problem with it, removing the vehicles. I think actually it did say in the previous April narrative that I had to provide information that they were registered. And so, which they are, but I just thought it was silly to provide that. But if all you're saying now is they need to be removed, that's fine.
Mayor Finkel, aye. Thank you. This is a public hearing item. If any other member of the public would like to speak, you can raise your hand using the raise your hand feature. If you're present, let Sherry know.
Chris Flowers.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers, and I don't think he should have to move the vehicles because I think it's kind of a bullshit city code. If someone had a big statue of like Mr. Toad in a car, that'd be considered art, and we'd all like it. But you put in an actual car that doesn't work, and it lowers property values, and you get people complaining. I think if it's his property, he should be allowed to keep cars that don't run on it. And also, if we're complaining, like when it comes to affordable housing, we're complaining about property values. Do we really want to start cracking down on ordinances that lower the property values? Maybe we should be asking him to start distributing some of his cars that don't work to the rest of the neighborhoods to start bringing down property values so we can get affordable housing. I'm just saying, I think people should be allowed to keep old cars on their property. It's their property. Thank you.
Mayor, that's all the public comment.
Mayor Finkel, aye. Thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public comment, bring it back to the commission for comments or motions.
This is Commissioner Nanda. I'd move to adopt Resolution 7371.
Commissioner Larson, second.
Mayor Finkel, aye. There's a motion by Commissioner Nanda, a second by Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Nanda?
Aye.
Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Boley?
Aye.
Mayor Finkel, aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much for everyone on that. We'll now move to regular agenda item number 5, which is to receive the Downtown Master Plan Steering Committee's recommendation to direct the consultant to continue the public comment for an additional 3 weeks, hold an additional steering committee meeting, revise the draft plan, and bring it back to the City Commission for consideration. Looks like Amy gets to present this one.
Good evening, Commissioners. Amy Miller, Assistant Planning and Development Services Director. This item is to receive the Downtown Master Plan Steering Committee's recommendation and direct the staff and consultants on the next steps. For background, the consultant, Housel Levine Associates, or HLA, kicked off the project in early November 2018 and conducted a full year of public engagement. In January of 2020, they brought forward an existing condition summary, vision, and guiding principles to the Public Downtown Master Plan Steering Committee and the City Commission for consideration. After delays due to the COVID pandemic, a draft plan was released at the end of April and public input was sought. A virtual public open house was held on May 20th and a Downtown Master Plan Steering Committee was held on May 27th. The committee recommended that the public comment period be extended for an additional 3 weeks and the comments received brought back to the steering committee at an additional meeting for consideration so that they could be more helpful in making a recommendation on the plan to the City Commission. Staff, along with HLA, will work to prepare a matrix that includes all the public comment received and a corresponding recommendation to help the steering committee work through the items. In light of the steering committee's recommendations, staff and the consultant are recommending that the City Commission direct the consultant to extend the public comment period an additional 3 weeks, hold one additional steering committee meeting in the early part of July, revise the plan as directed by the steering committee, and bring that revised plan back to the city commission, most likely in August. If directed, staff and the consultant will work to accomplish the revised plan and set the meeting dates. The consultant has indicated that the expanded public comment period and one additional steering committee meeting can be accommodated under the existing contract, scope, and budget. Further changes to the scope or additional meetings will result in a change in scope and potentially a request for an increased budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and the consultant is also available on the meeting as well. Thank you.
Mayor Finkel, thank you for that update. Do commissioners have questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Larson, Amy, could you repeat what the steering committee wants as far as the extensions? It kept cutting out a little bit on me.
Sure. The recommendation from the steering committee was that public comment be extended an additional 3 weeks, that we hold one additional steering committee meeting. The consultant will then revise the draft plan based on the steering committee's meeting and their recommendation, and the revised plan will be brought back to the city commission for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Finkel, other questions? I guess this is a public hearing item. If any member of the public would like to speak on this item about continuing the public comment, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, or let Sherry know and she will call upon you.
Chris Flowers, did you want to speak to this item? I wasn't sure if your hand was still up from the previous item or not. Mayor, it looks like there's no public comment on this item.
Mayor Finkel, thank you. Bring it back to the commission for comments and motions. I guess I would just start by saying I appreciate the work of the steering committee and the fact that we're getting lots of comments, and I look forward to hearing the comments and hearing what the steering committee has to say about that and bringing us back the best recommendation they can. So appreciate that effort.
I'll make a motion. This is Commissioner Larson, sorry. So we've received the Downtown Master Plan Steering Committee's recommendation, and we want to direct this consultant to continue the public comment an additional 3 weeks, hold an additional steering committee meeting, revise the draft plan, and bring it back to the city commission for consideration.
This is Commissioner Bowley, second.
Mayor Finkel, there's a motion by Commissioner Lawson, a second by Commissioner Bowley. Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Ananda? Mayor Finkel, aye. Passes 5-0. Look forward to receiving that report back. Regular agenda item number 6 is to receive a staff update on the downtown temporary right-of-way program and direct staff as appropriate. Enrico, do you have this one?
I do. Porter, am I able to share my screen? This is Enrico, Program Administrator.
You should be able to. Let me know if you have trouble.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Finkeldye, Vice Mayor Shipley, and Commissioners. I'm Enrico Villegas, Program Administrator with the Municipal Services and Operations Department. Tonight, I'll be providing a bite-sized update via presentation of the Parklet program. I do want to throw out the disclaimer that I may say downtown temporary right-of-way program or Parklet program. They're both interchangeable. They mean the same thing. But I do want to throw that out there. Just one's a little more salient than the other. So to get started, I do want to highlight a key month in 2020 that really helped shape the story of the Parklet program and how we got here today. So in mid-March of 2020, the country was shut down in direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And subsequent to that, late March, early April were the first issuances of the stay-at-home orders. And there was a lot of fear and anxiety in society collectively, that especially as we were learning more about the pandemic and its potential to take one's life, but also the potential to take one's livelihood. The city in mid-May of 2020 was engaged in conversations with Downtown Lawrence Inc. and others to look at an innovative idea to spark economic activity in downtown. And that innovative idea was the expansion of the parklets in the city's public rights of way. And there was the collective understanding that the parklet program should have a sense of urgency with it. With the country being shut down, to people being told to stay at home, to try to keep businesses alive, we had to move fast. And so, interestingly enough, certainly not intentional, June 2nd of 2020 was the first time that the Parklet program was presented to the commission. So we're 1 day shy of the 1 year anniversary. But I wanted to share those because I believe that they're pivotal in this conversation. So the Parklet program at its core can really be seen as an economic development tool. So in one arm of economic development is business attraction, try to bring in new business into the city. And then the other arm of economic development is business retention. And so I believe that was the purpose of the Parklet program. And in addition to certain highlights of the Parklet program, it is an adaptive solution to an adaptive problem. And to build from that, a majority of the adaptiveness of the program is the technical components that make that up. And so in a couple of slides, I'll mention in some detail some of the challenges that we've had. But before I do, it wouldn't be a full update if I didn't mention at least some successes that the program has had. And so in particular, several of the restaurant establishments that have participated in the program have told staff that if it wasn't for the program, that they would have to have closed. One establishment mentioned that they were able to keep all 35 of their staff employed. So I'm sure there are others on the call tonight that can speak to what the program means to them. But I did want to state that. And then there were other key features of the program worth mentioning. We've suspended the sidewalk dining licensing fees throughout the 2021 fiscal year. We've waived the site planning requirements and allowed those plans and permits to be approved administratively versus, say, going to the City Commission or the Historic Resources Commission for approval. And one key note that I did not put on this slide, but is also worth mentioning, is that the program was intended for anyone in the downtown commercial zoning district. So whether you're a retailer or a restaurant, you could have participated in the program and still can. So this slide, I I wanted to capture kind of some key data points with this, because the parking is really going to help shape the story of where we are currently. And we are currently on day 350 of the program. And with the 350 days of activity, 22 participants have elected to participate in the program. 16 have been parklets, 6 sidewalk dining. And of the 22 participants in the program, 50 parking stalls are occupied. And the breakdown is 38 on Mass Street, 12 on the side streets. And there are some higher concentration areas, like the 700 block. 15 stalls are occupied via parklets. And then on East 8th Street on the north and south sides, 7 are occupied. And while the curbside to go is not formally a part of the parklet program, it was kind of a spinoff. And approximately 30 businesses have participated in that curbside to go. And that 30 is equating to 49 parking stalls. So as a very general overview, there are 366 parking stalls on Mass Street. There are 2,988 total in downtown. That is the metered stalls, the surface lots, and the parking garages. So what that means for the program is that the parklets plus the curbside is equating to roughly 3.3% of the parking stalls available in downtown. But there is a caveat to that while it's only 3.3% of the parking stalls in downtown, the parklets coupled with the curbside to go is 21% of the parking on Mass Street. So almost a quarter of all the parking stalls on Mass Street are occupied. So I wanted to mention that. So that's it for this slide. Some of the challenges that we've had, I tried to compartmentalize them as best I could, being codes issues, the built environment, and just miscellaneous. So some of the codes issues, just very generally, that we are on day 350, and I have 180 up there because the chapter 16 of the code right of way, the building code and the fire code all deem that temporary is 180 consecutive days or less. And we've obviously almost doubled that. And then there's a potential issue with the downtown design guidelines that in the eyes of staff, I think we see that this is a temporary program. There is an end date. There was an end date. And the code sees it as 180 consecutive days or less. The downtown design guidelines were able to have the, I guess under normal circumstances, and in most cases, if there was some development in downtown, it would have to go to the HRC. Because it was temporary, that was allowed to be administratively reviewed. So that's at least one thing that we'll need to look at. And then there are the built environment issues, and I've tried to also break it into the quick fixes and then the ones that you really have to think about. One is irrigation and the concrete planters. And in certain cases, they would turn on and ended up spraying the patrons. So we've had to look at changing the timing on things in order to make that work. And then just in general, the downtown congestion. It is a truck delivery route. It is a transit route as well that's heavily utilized. There are active street events coming back. We're seeing numerous applications for those in downtown. There's a lot of active infill development going on. and then just general shopping. And so all of those things can also add to the perception that there's not a lot of parking in downtown. There's a lot of things to coordinate and work through. So those are just some issues, at least with the built environment. And so I won't spend too much time on that. But so I guess for tonight would be that the commission directs staff to work on what a permanent or long-term program for the parklets, and then to present that to the commission at a later date. And the reason being too that the downtown master plan is recommending that the city look at a parklet program to be permanent. So, and we would use public engagement, better design criteria, and look at other ways in which the parklet program has fiscally impacted the city. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Mayor Finkelstein, thank you, Enrico. Other questions for Enrico? Can you go ahead and stop sharing your screen, Enrico?
Yes.
Brad, I see that you are present. Do you have any comments to add on the parking? I know Enrico talked about that some, but I'd be interested. Obviously, parking is one of the major issues.
Yeah, we've continued to kind of evaluate, the current state of downtown. I think we can certainly say, without question, that we are seeing an uptick, in our public parking lots in different areas. I think we still have plenty of available parking right now. We recently implemented the LPR, license plate recognition equipment. We've been working on kind of the detailed operational portion of that, trying to get it to meet the city of Lawrence needs from an enforcement standpoint. And so right now, unfortunately, we do not have that really valuable occupancy data that could help us, in the long term. But that has, I've heard that will be completed within the week. And so hopefully in the near future, we will really have that data. I think that we have seen an overall very successful program, that a lot of businesses have certainly benefited from. And I feel like in my position as the parking supervisor, I've heard a little bit of both sides, both sides of the story. I think it's right now what this program might look like in the future. I think it can be morphed into a lot of different ways, depending on what, you as the commissioners might feel might be the best direction for us to move forward with, whether that is, the long-term parklet program and, the continuous of the curbside pickup stalls, if we so choose to go down that route. So I know that's kind of a long-winded generic answer, but, certainly think that we still have room to accommodate, this program, and just, the state of what it looks like moving forward is certainly, under the control of you folks. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Mayor Finkelstein, thank you. And I don't know if this is for you or Enrico. As part of this motion, I wasn't clear until I saw your presentation, but would you consider, if we move forward with public engagement and talking about the parklet program, does that include the curbside to go as a possible continuation as part of that full discussion?
This is Enrico, program administrator. In talking with merchants en masse, some have expressed that they would like for those to go. That they do add to confusion to downtown. If they pull into a stall, then they recognize that there's a sign there and then have to reverse out and find another place to park. Some have stated that they've been abused, that they should be to go, but people just end up parking there long term. So it's certainly something to be evaluated. I'm not sure how we would capture that in any metric. But something to look at.
Mayor Finkelstein, thank you for that. Other questions for Enrico or Brad?
This is Commissioner Ananda. I had a question about just kind of if when we do direct engagement of stakeholders, will that also include the public and the broader public? And what does the timeline look on that?
This is Enrico Villegas, Program Administrator. That would revolve around engaging the public at large, and the direct stakeholders of downtown, probably the appropriate Historic Resources Commission as well, just to get some feedback from them. The timeline, I don't have a good answer on that yet, but we would definitely act swiftly to try to get something going. And we work with our communications team on what those best strategies would be. But at least a 1 to 2 month process just to get some healthy dialogue with everyone.
This is Commissioner Ananda. How in the meantime would you deal with like public events? I know we received a letter from the organizer of the Busker Fest, and I know that's not until later in the year, so presumably that would be back. But are there plans in place for dealing with public events in the meantime?
This is Enrico Villegas, Program Administrator. Yes and no. Parks and Rec currently administers the street events, and we are working together on trying to figure out what a good strategy would be. But we don't have anything legitimate right now.
Vice Mayor Shipley, I'm wondering if it's gonna, in the long run, be a little confusing to have the outdoor dining and the parklets have separate rules. Or is there some way you guys are thinking about streamlining that, whatever direction we move in?
This is Enrico Villegas, Program Administrator. We would look into that, yeah.
Vice Mayor Shipley, not to get too into the details because I see that you want to get a lot of input from the public, but regarding the curbside pickup, one idea I did hear was to have specific stalls on the side streets, which I thought might address the public event issue if those were the side streets had specific spots delineated for pickup, then they wouldn't have the prime Massachusetts spots, but they would be available for pickup and maybe lessen the amount of parklets on side streets. Was that something that you guys heard about?
This is Brad Harrell, parking supervisor. On the contrary to that, I would also mention that, there is so parking on the side streets might be prime parking for that particular business. I know not every business is en masse. So in a sense, I think we might just be shifting a potential problem. The city actually had, well prior to this, and it might not be as widely known as it is, but there is a number of 15-minute meters on Massachusetts Street right now that are intended for this exact purpose. Well before the pandemic, well before this, this program, there is, I believe, at least 4 per block, and it actually might be a little bit more than that. And there are some of those on the side streets as well. So I think there's actually, an alternative in there for the curbside pickup parking stalls right now, because that's what those 15-minute meters are intended for. They're for a quick grab, drop a dime, go grab your food and move on. So I would say that's kind of the alternative to, shifting a curbside pickup stall to a different location.
Vice Mayor Shipley, and if memory serves, those are ADA accessible, the 15 minutes.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. This is Brad Harrell, parking supervisor. Every single meter in the downtown area with an valid accessible placard is free to the public. So any stall that, and that includes time limits as well in any of the remote parking or back parking lots.
Mayor Finkel, any questions? Oh, Commissioner Larson?
Yeah, Commissioner Larson here. So Enrico, I heard a little bit about you discussing what sort of engagement you were thinking about doing, but you don't have at this time a plan laid out as to how many community meetings you're going to have, what sort of a committee you're going to have, if at all. Nothing detailed. Is that correct?
Enrico Villegas, Program Administrator. That's correct, Commissioner Larson.
Thank you, Commissioner Larson. Thank you.
Mayor Finkel, Commissioner Bowley, go ahead.
Enrico, you introduced this topic as economic development. And, as we come back from the pandemic, we're hoping that downtown will pick up. If, the parklet program ends up, essentially providing a public subsidy to businesses downtown, do you plan on providing wage data for the businesses that would receive subsidies?
This is Enrico Villegas, Program Administrator, and Commissioner Bowley, by that, in terms of how they're benefiting from that, is that what you're asking?
No, generally Commissioner Bowley, when we do economic development subsidies, for example, U.S. engineering, many times we get information about what the jobs that are being, essentially subsidized with that development, what they pay their employees. Now with the Catalyst program, we've waived some of that stuff, but the businesses provide a lot of that anyway. So I just want, if you're couching this in terms of economic development, you might consider providing some wage data for businesses that might benefit from it. The other question I have is, you mentioned that it's been 350 days. Do you have data on how many hours the parklets were being used during each of those 350 days?
This is Enrico Villegas, Program Administrator. I do not.
Okay, thank you.
This is Commissioner Larson. Enrico, I got another question for you. Do you have any idea of how you would engage the store owners who are mostly retail or all retail, and in order to address their needs for parking? Have you thought about that yet?
This is Enrico Villegas, Program Administrator. I've definitely, it's been on my mind for a long time, but in terms of anything concrete, I don't have anything at the moment, but I do plan on, discussing this with Porter and others to figure out what a good way to do that would be. So, hopefully after this meeting, we can have an internal staff meeting and kind of figure out what that would look like.
Thank you. Commissioner Larson, thank you.
This is Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I might jump in as well. I think that as with a lot of things in the downtown, the purpose of the engagement process that we plan to engage with will hopefully be able to provide us a lot of good input that we can provide the appropriate balance back to you all in balancing all the various interests of downtown between retailers and restaurants and other activities in the downtown area. And another thing I might add, I think with regard to the economic development question that came up earlier is I see this parklet program potentially being much like an extension of our sidewalk dining program. So while we don't really have a measure of the jobs created for that, that kind of a program certainly does add to the overall ambiance of the the downtown, and also, as you all know, that generally that sidewalk dining program has a fee attached to it that is meant to compensate the city for the use of that right of way for that particular program, which we've had for some time. So again, I think this is just all a balance. Also in looking at what the downtown master plan is talking to us about, and suggesting that we look at in order to make the downtown the way that we would like it to be for our folks coming in the downtown area and for all the people doing business in there and the
Mayor Finkel, other questions before I open it to public comment? Seeing none, this is a public hearing item. If any member of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature. Or if you're present, let Sherry know and she will call upon you.
This is Sherry Ruderman, City Clerk. If you would like to provide comment on this item, even if you registered on Zoom, please raise your hand, or you can even just turn on your video to indicate that you wish to speak on this item. Ben Albers.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just had a couple of, I guess, maybe general questions about process. It seems to me, you know, listening to previous meetings with the master plan discussion, the downtown master plan, and some of the other sort of auxiliary questions or conversations about this, that they're kind of running in tandem, but yet they're not synced up in some kind of way, at least from my perspective. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm wondering, A, what's driving the initiative to go from temporary to permanent with the parklets? Is that spurred by the master plan, or is it something else? So that's one question for the staff. And then the other question would be the process in terms of getting input from stakeholders, businesses, residents, organizations, in how something like this is going to affect how they operate or function in this part of the city. And I think that's probably it for now. So if there's any more detail about process, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Jennifer McKnight.
Hi, sorry about that. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, the letter from me to the commission that was attached to this agenda, I think pretty much says what I feel about this program. There was a story in the paper today, and it makes it sound like I'm diametrically opposed to the parklet program. And I'm not, and I don't think any other retailer could say that they're against it totally. I just think the problem is in its current iteration. I think there's way too many parklets on the 700 block. I think it severely curtails our parking. And I think Commissioner Bowley brought up a great point as to how many days the parklets are actually being used out of the year. Because we, you know, in a perfect climate, these would be wonderful. They would be a great addition to downtown. But the fact is there's only a few weeks out of the year when they can be useful to anybody. And the irony is that when nobody is using the parklets, when it's, you know, when the restaurants aren't using them because it's raining or snowing or too hot or too cold, that's right when retail customers need convenient parking the most. And I can say that for sure about our elderly customers and our, physically challenged customers. They have to deal with that, all the time. And on our block in particular, it's parking has just been decimated. But I do think there's room for compromise, because I think there's a lot that the parklets bring to downtown. I think what Mr. Villegas was saying about, it being something that's been seen as a benefit to downtown, I think that is true. But I think that there's a lot of limitation that needs to be placed on when they're used. I have a list of ideas that I can send to you, or I'll just go ahead and read them. I would say scale way back on the number of restaurants that are allowed to take up public parking. Limit the number of parklets per block. Limit parklet permits to only those restaurants who plan on using them during lunch hours and dinner hours, because otherwise the space is just entirely wasted. Nobody's benefiting from a space that's not being used. And if a restaurant is choosing to only use them at night, that doesn't seem like a really great use of public space. Limit the number of parking spaces any one restaurant is able to use. Set some sort of aesthetic or code of standards for each parklet. And then to address the retail benefits, I would want to hear how the city plans on improving and creating more safe and convenient parking to benefit retail and everybody, so that we continue to attract new people to come to downtown Lawrence and enjoy what we have to offer. I want to thank the commissioners for your attention to this issue, and I appreciate your time and your attention to this.
Is there anyone else who would like to provide comment on this item? That's all the comment, Mayor.
Mayor Finkeldye, bring it back to the commission for comments and direction. I guess I would start, and I certainly agree with Ms. McKnight. It's pretty much what I've been hearing, that in general, people like the parklet program, but there could definitely be some improvements with some of the exact comments that Ms. McKnight brought up. Limitations on the block, when they're used, how they're used, how much someone pays for that, and issues like that. I think Mr. Alvarez asked about process. I think there was, the downtown master plan had something to do with it, but also, we have extended the program through the end of the year. But, some folks are asking, if it's going to continue past December, or what it's going to look like, how we should address that. And then second, I think some of these issues we've talked about on, code issues and some of those things like that, getting those addressed sooner rather than later, I think is important, as we go certainly into the fall. And so, I do think it's a program that has merit, but it's a program that we need to look at and try to fix some of the issues, and find that right balance. I think Diane said that as well, find the right balance between all of those. And I think there's a lot of issues that we can use to talk about that, a lot of venues we can use to talk about that. And so I look forward to that. I guess the last thing I would say, I know there's a lot of questions about what the process is. Yeah, I would, I think if we direct tonight to ask staff to engage in that, if it's something we want to see before they start the process, we could ask staff to bring us back their process before it starts, rather than having them just jump into it if people are concerned about that. So anyway, those are my comments. Other comments or questions?
Yeah, Commissioner Arson, that was one I was going to bring up, is my concern as to what their plan is as to how they're going to engage the community. I think it would help me to look at this more positively if I knew how they were going to do this, this whole process of engaging the community. So I would appreciate that information ahead of time before we jump too much into it. The other thing we didn't talk about was the possibility that if this program were to continue in some form at all, that, I would be very interested in knowing what sort of fees would be charged to the business owners who are using it. Because one thing that we all know is that the downtown properties are the most expensive in the city of Lawrence. And so I think that if we get that far in the process, that those who use these parklets should be paying that market rate for the properties. And I don't want that to escape us, and for that to be part of the conversation. I think we need to make sure it gets in there.
Vice Mayor Shipley, yeah, I agree. And I seem to remember the last time we talked about this, when we extended it to December, that I specifically wanted to know what the cost of that would it be in the long run if we wanted to continue something like that. So I imagine that staff has been thinking about this in the back of their minds. And again, the same question that I meant about the continuity with outdoor dining. There is a cost for outdoor dining that is not free. Businesses do pay an amount of money to use that space. So will that be commensurate with the outdoor dining? Will the price go up? What will that balance look like? Certainly never dreamed that we would allow businesses to use public space for free when we ever discussed this previously, except for an emergency situation. Another issue I think that we talked about previously was indeed addressing the not using it year round. I seem to remember moons ago, there was a construction project on downtown, and many hours were spent making sure that all of the parking stalls in front of certain businesses doing construction would be available during the holiday season. So I think many of us know how important parking is downtown during the holiday season. And if these won't be used year round, I believe I suggested last time that we might consider finding storage for some of these larger pieces that are built, or the heaters and the chairs and the things like that we could provide during the wintry season, when you certainly won't be eating outdoors, so that those parking spaces can be used by the retailers who will definitely need it during the holiday season. So I hope when those discussions come up, those suggestions will be remembered. And then, if they do it only, let's say, for 6 months out of the year, do they pay for the year? Do they pay for the month? How will that work out? So all the things I think we're thinking about, how to charge fairly for the use of that space, but also be flexible. And of course, a lot of complaints about the Jersey barriers and wanting those to look a lot better, in addition to all the safety issues that we know exist that Enrico outlined. And I hope when we do have this engagement, then that parking data will be available so that we can be more clear about what the actual usage is. And I would also remind us that our parking study, if I recall, and the downtown study as it is right now, suggests considering charging people to park in the evenings. So the inequity of businesses that are only open during the day having this kind of competition could be evened out merely by charging parking in the evening. Those are kind of some of my thoughts.
This is Commissioner Ananda. I agree with what the mayor said. I think that I think that there's space for giving thoughts, but I would like for the community to really think outside of the box and the potential of downtown, and how do we explore all of those options without putting literal or metaphorical barriers around that contemplation. And I look forward to the opportunity for our community to really dig into that and the potential of our downtown.
This is Commissioner Bullock. I don't really have anything to add. Y'all have done a good job. Thanks.
Mayor Finkeldine, would any other comments or motion on?
Commissioner Larson, I would want to make sure that we get an advanced look at what their process, how they're going to engage the community before I would vote on this.
Vice Mayor Shipley, I wonder if I kind of consider our city manager to be the keeper of our strategic plan that includes engagement, and I wonder if he could tell us how he would direct staff to do this, or guarantee us that it is the kind of robust engagement that we have come to expect.
Thank you, City Manager Craig Owens. Guarantees, right? No, I appreciate it. This is something that we're working on, and actually, we will design the engagement process and be really excited to share it with you before we move it out into the community. But we really need to account for all the stakeholders, all the different perspectives, and figure out how do we get those perspectives built in here, and then how do we do a reporting mechanism so that they understand how their input has been accounted for and how it's influenced the final decisions, which ultimately will be yours. So we'll want to make sure that you also feel at the end of the process that we've accounted for all the different stakeholder positions and perspectives, as well as provided a lot of data behind that. So that's a guarantee that I'll make you for this process and for everything else we have going forward. I think Porter's probably got some ideas on that as well. So thanks for the opportunity.
Mayor Finkeldine. Commissioner Lawson, I guess I was thinking we could possibly say, in the motion that we direct staff to develop an engagement process, bring it back to us for approval, something like that. Is that what you're saying? Or you wanting to say you don't want to vote on this at all? Or
Yeah, if we add,
until
yeah, Commissioner Larson, yeah, if we add something like that, a caveat to it, I would be fine with that. I thought we could see more tonight on what their plan was. It didn't seem like they really they don't have a plan yet. And so I was a little disappointed in that, but I have no doubt that they'll put one together, but it would have been nice to see it tonight.
Mayor Finkeldine, I guess I think the direction was they wanted some direction from us before they put the time into creating the plan. If we were going to say no, that we wanted it to end on December 2021 with no choice, then why put the time into it? But at least that's how I took where we're at tonight.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Nanda. I think that I would prefer receiving the plan rather than approving the plan prior to implementation. And obviously at any time we can give suggestion, but as someone who is not paid by the city to engage public engagement, I don't want to necessarily for us to have to approve that plan, because there are always tweaks, there are always changes that can happen. That's just my personal preference.
Commissioner Larson, so would that mean that there wouldn't be an opportunity at all to make any changes to it? Is that what you're saying?
This is Commissioner Nanda. No, it would just be that we could give direction, but I just don't know that we would, we generally don't approve public engagement plans, but we do give direction and have conversation around that is generally accepted by staff.
Okay.
Mayor Finkeldine. So listening to those comments, I'm thinking to myself about a motion here. I'm not going to make the motion yet, but I'll say it something like this to see what Commissioner Lawson thinks. That we direct staff to create a public engagement process and to engage stakeholders to develop a long-term program for future city commission consideration. That way we can consider both of those items. First, the public engagement, and then the actual plan at the end of it.
Commissioner Larson, that's fine.
Mayor Finkel, then I'd go ahead and turn that into a motion. I move that we direct staff to develop a community engagement process and to engage stakeholders to develop a long-term program for the future, for future city commission consideration.
Vice Mayor Shipley, second.
Mayor Finkel, there's a motion by myself, a second by Vice Mayor Shipley. I'll vote aye. Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Ananda?
Aye.
Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Mayor, this
Thank
is
you.
Commissioner Ananda. I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't need to add that we receive that as well, or is that just an action that we've engaged in we don't need to move?
Mayor Finkel, that's a good question. I turn all questions like that to our very valuable city clerk, Sherry Riedemann.
Sherry Riedemann, City Clerk, you do not need to include that in your motion.
Mayor Finkel, I thank you both for that. Thank you, Enrico and Brad and Diane and Craig. We look forward to that discussion coming back before us. It's going to be a good update. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break before we jump into the rest of the regular agenda items. We'll take a 10-minute break, return, it looks like at 8:01.
Oops. There we go. Ready now, Mayor. Sorry, I had my other one off.
Mayor Finkel, no problem. Thank you. We are back from a break. I will go ahead and take roll call. Vice Mayor Shipley,
Here.
Commissioner Ananda,
Here.
Commissioner Lawson,
Here.
Commissioner Bully,
Here.
Mayor Finkel, I am here as well. And we're now going on to regular agenda item number 7, which is to consider authorizing city manager execute an engineering agreement with TREC for engineering services related to the stormwater system. Nick, do you have this one?
Yes, I do, Mayor. Thanks for hearing us today. My name is Nick Hoyt. I'm engineering program manager, and Matt Bond and I are going to be working together on this presentation. I thought we'd be a little later in the evening where I'd be in the house and my kids would be asleep. So sorry, I'm in the garage. This is where I've been the last year. So I guess it's okay. But so Matt and I have been working really hard for the last few months getting some major stormwater initiative projects up and running and getting to this point where we're ready to execute contracts. We thought we would just take a moment at this commission meeting to give an overview of the several of the projects that we have moving forward at this time. We thought we'd be a little later in the evening, so we tried to keep it short and a real high level information meeting. There's plenty of time, it appears, so feel free to ask as many questions as you want. We also have both representatives from Trek Design Group team, from their team, and JEO, who's going to be working on the Jayhawk watershed. So we can have one presentation for both commission items 7 and 8. So we'll just start that. So we're gonna look at several of our programs that is above what our internal staff do. You know, the cleaning and the TVing and a lot of the point repairs our staff do has been going on for a long time, and we're increasing our effort on several other programs, including the maintenance plan program, which is separate from the CIP, several capital improvement plan projects, and then the stormwater system ID assessment and model creation program. Can I share here? Yep. Okay, so the maintenance plan projects are focused on localized issues. Those could either be structural or localized flooding. They include both rehabilitation, which the largest part of that is cured in place pipe, which is lining the existing storm sewer. We've been doing that in conjunction with our sanitary sewer lining program. Right now we have about 3,500 feet of storm sewer under contract to line. That is mainly focused on sewers underneath arterial streets. So let's line those, renew the structural integrity of that before it collapses under 6th Street or 23rd Street. Doing that in conjunction with our sanitary sewer program has really allowed us to get a good price on that, and we plan to keep doing that moving forward. We're also rehabilitating the tops of several storm inlets across town. I think we spend about $100,000 a year on that storm inlet top replacement. But once we're past rehabilitation, we're into reconstruction and replacement. And we have 2 on-call stormwater engineers or city staff that can provide design. And then that the work can be completed by either our city staff or bid out to construction. Our budget right now is about $1 million a year. And of the projects, we have 6 that we're moving forward with design here as shown. We do not have the budget to complete construction on all 6 of these this year, but we are trying to move forward with design as quickly as possible on these to see how funding works in the future. Maybe there's some stimulus funding that will work out. Or, maybe we have enough for Wilshire Drive, but not 13th and Kentucky in any given year. So we're trying to move forward with a finalized design as quickly as possible on these. The other thing we're working hard at is that you'll hear repeated in this presentation is working on a corridor concept. So by that, we mean when we go to Sharon Drive, we aren't just looking at the storm sewers. We're trying to fix other things while we're there, minimize impact to the residents, and also hopefully get more bang from our buck with our budget. The first two that you'll probably see go to construction is Sharon Drive and 13th and Kentucky, but we are moving forward with design on all 6 of these. Matt's going to do a quick overview of the 3 main CIP projects that we have moving forward at this time.
Good evening, Commissioners and Mayor. Matt Bond, Engineering Program Manager. So as Nick mentioned, what we're going to try and do for a lot of our projects moving forward is a corridor approach. And so with the 17th and Alabama project, that project is currently about 80% done with design. Originally, it was known as project number 11 in the 1996 master plan. Along with that corridor approach that I mentioned a minute ago, we've added 3,000 feet of water main along with this project to take advantage of some of those streets we've got torn up. So that's primarily along 18th Street. So with this project, the intent is to solve the current localized flooding that we have along 19th Street, specifically between Missouri and Maine. So if you've ever been down there and seen that, you know that firsthand. One of the other things that I really want to eliminate is any more pictures of people canoeing down Alabama. That's not a good thing. We want to drive down our streets, not row down them. And then as you can see from this map that we've updated the size of the structures underneath 19th Street, which goes from like an 18-inch pipe to a 42-inch. And then the main trunk line that ends up going down 20th Street is a 48-inch, and that turns into an 8x8 box. So that gives you an idea of the volume of water that we have on the 17th and Alabama project. So the reason the next agenda item after Nick's would be the Jayhawk watershed. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we do with this one is we're going to review the watershed from basically Memorial Stadium all the way to the Kansas River. Now this was actually also included as projects number 23 and 24 in the 96 master plan. So we're going to get a good hydrologic and hydraulic model of this watershed. And the end game is to develop a conceptual design of the watershed. And then, of course, we'll be talking to residents with our community engagement so they know where it's going and get involved. We're going to keep everybody informed with that. So then on to Maple Lane. This starts primarily at Edgewood Park and runs south down Maple Lane to some distance to be determined by similar watershed study as to how far that will go. This project is currently in the 2023 CIP, and it was originally project number 34 in the 96 master plan. Now, Nick's going to talk about a couple things here in a second, along with our corridor approach that we've had pop up recently, and he'll fill you in on those things.
Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. So as Matt said, we have this Maple Lane Stormwater Project currently in the 23 CIP. One thing that all the heavy rains may have allowed us to do is see somewhere some issues are firsthand in our sanitary sewer system. So we identified, so the sanitary sewer is the yellow here, and we identified a capacity issue on Maple right there in the same location as the storm sewer project. So we're now looking at accelerating that schedule and coming up Maple with new storm, sanitary, and while we're at it, let's fix the water line that's on that same street at the same time. This is all this change of plan has just happened in the last couple of weeks, so it is still developing, but I think kind of big picture, that's what we're trying to do is work with storm projects and find other issues at the same time and streamline streamline our projects to fix as many things there in one shot. So that's our third CIP CIP project that's currently in the budget. And then I'm going to focus here on the Stormwater System ID Assessment and Model Program. And this is item 7 on tonight's agenda. So, as Matt alluded to, we've been working from a 1996 master plan for a long time. Right now, there's a lot of questions in our storm sewer. So, right off the top, let's find out where our storm sewers are, what condition they're in, what's their hydraulic, what capacity do they have for design storm. Let's come up with a logical and transparent system to develop and prioritize a CIP. So in a nutshell, that's what this program is. It's a 3-year program where this is the initial phase. There's a hybrid team between city staff and outside contractor. And this contract under consideration tonight is the initial phase. It's split about 50-50 between planning for that citywide 3-year effort while focusing on 2 pilot basins. The 2 pilot basins we selected is Quail Creek, which is roughly, it runs just west of Castle from 6th Street all the way south to the edge of town, and what we're calling Northwest Burroughs Creek, which is roughly from like 16th and Tennessee going east to like 13th and Burroughs Creek. And what we selected these for isn't due to known stormwater issues there, but they provide a representative cross-section of all the different scenarios and conditions of the stormwater system across the city. Quail Creek is a mainly open channel watershed. Burroughs Creek is, that section of it is completely enclosed system. And there's a range of stuff built 100 plus years ago to newer, different materials. And Quail Creek has a lot of interaction with the FEMA floodplain on the southern sides, on the southern end. So as we do this initial project and we encounter these different situations, we'll be able to develop the procedures to carry that program through the 3 years and through the rest of the city. And at the end, we will have a well thought out, well-researched, prioritized CIP to move forward. So with that, that's the end of our very short presentation. We have the consulting teams for both projects here. If you have any questions, or Matt and I would also be happy to answer any questions you have.
Finkel, I thank you very much for that presentation. Looks like Vice Mayor Shipley has a question.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Shipley. So I want to be clear. The ID and assessment and modeling will ultimately result in something that replaces the stormwater master plan from before when you and I graduated high school?
Yes. Ideally, I would, in 3 years, we never have to research back to this was a 1996 master plan project. Not to say that the 96 master plan projects that weren't completed won't show up on the next one or will, but it'll be independent.
Vice Mayor Shipley, and since this would all be based on data, there would also be flexibility. For example, if something came up after 6 years that was inexplicably over capacity, you could reprioritize it.
Yes, Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. I mean, any CIP is a living, breathing plan that changes with new information every day. And I would also say that like projects prioritized through that program might not be done first, because if we're already tearing up what other street for a particular project, I think we might move. We should move items around to match other projects, as we kind of talked about with the corridor approach. And any CIP is always getting new information. Even after this program, we're going to be getting new information on our stormwater system for the rest of our lives. So that CIP will constantly be changing.
Commissioner Larson, I have a question on the Jayhawk watershed. You'd indicated, Matt, I believe it was, that said that what's on the agenda tonight is for a design concept for that. Is that my understanding, Matt?
That is correct. So what they'll do is they'll put the model together. They'll go through and they'll find out exactly where everything is positively, make sure they know the size, the material type, and those things, model that, and then come back and say, how can we improve on this? Can we keep segments of the current system, or do we need to get rid of the whole thing? Or so that's what that H&H model is going to tell us.
Commissioner Larson, thank you for that. So the $215,000 that's in the agenda for tonight, that's for the entire design concept for that basin or watershed?
Yes, that's going to cover the hydraulic model. That's not going to give you design construction plans, but yes, it's going to give you an H&H model to tell us, hey, how are we going to go? And to key on to what Nick was just saying about the CIP is we're going through here and say in year 2, we find something else, and maybe we've broken, maybe I'm getting into the weeds too much, but if we had it broken into a couple of projects in Jayhawk, if we find something with the asset management that says, hey, this should be a little higher, then we can start moving projects around.
Commissioner Larson, thank you. That's what I was hoping. 215, that seems, actually, I was surprised it was would include that much information. So I think that's real good. Thank you.
Mayor Finkeldine, just to follow up on that, I mean, I think we have something like $6 million or something set aside in the CIP, hoping to what we actually have to construct, correct? So this is the first step in a very large project.
That's correct. Engineering Program Manager Matt Bond, that is correct, Mayor.
Mayor Finkeldine, other questions before I open it to public comment?
Yeah, Commissioner Larson, I've got one more, if I can remember what it was. It just escaped me. I'll think about it. Okay, sorry about that.
Vice Mayor Shipley, it makes a lot of sense to do projects in the way that you're speaking, where you're already in one place, so do everything. How do we make sure that we're keeping equity in mind? So, for example, I would hate to see a project in a low mod area of town consistently fall in the ranks of priority without some kind of balancing. So even if it was due to data, how would we look and make sure, okay, we spent twice as much money in a very wealthy part of town and nearly nothing in a lower mod part of town?
Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. So I think what you're getting at is the stormwater capital improvement plan developed through the asset and inventory project needs to match the priorities and the same system as like the citywide CIP development. And if Andy's here and ready to hit the mic, he can talk to that, because he really did a great job about how those two things interact.
Yeah, Nick, Andy Sauer with Burns McDonnell. It's a great question. What we laid out, or what we envision, is a CIP evaluation process where we'll develop criteria for the stormwater improvements, and that will obviously start with how we're mitigating flooding, but it also might be how it relates to other corridor improvements. And then we'll assign a score to those, and then working with probably just internal or some stakeholders, develop a weighting process for those criteria. So, for example, your question about, equity, that could be how we weight those. And that way we're comparing each of the improvements equally across all the different sectors, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what we envision for the priority process. Where we want stakeholders to help with that is that weighting. So what's more important? So if equity is a higher weight, then we can weight it that way. So, but that same scoring will be used for all the stormwater projects, if that makes sense. So that's what we envision, and that's the way we can keep that kind of fair and equitable across all the improvements.
Commissioner Larson, I remember my question. Have we done any of this stormwater assessment ID process before. I thought I'd seen it on the CIP. Am I missing something?
Yes, Nick Hoyt, Engineering Program Manager. That Asset and Inventory Program is in the CIP. It's a 3-year program, I think MS 219804. So I think there's $6-something million over 3 years in the CIP now for this program.
Commissioner Larson, thank you. So we're just now starting this program. Is that correct?
Yes. So the Nick Hoyt Engineering Program Manager. So the funding was finalized when the rates were established in December. We issued a RFQ early January, and have been in the selection process and contract negotiation process through the 6 months here. So that's why we're pretty excited to get going.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mayor Finkeldye, Nick, I just want to confirm your presentation was for 7 and 8, correct? Both
yes.
items? Okay, so I'll go ahead and open up public comment to items 7 and 8. If any member of the public would like to speak to either item 7 or 8 related to stormwater and the 2 contracts, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, or if you're present, let Sherry know and she'll call upon you.
Mayor, there's no public comment on those items.
Mayor Finkeldye, thank you. We'll bring these items back. You know, I would just echo, I'm excited to get this project underway, and you know, obviously we raised stormwater rates, but this is what we were hoping to get from that. And so I'm excited, 1, to get it underway. 2, I'm excited Vice Mayor Shipley's comment and Andy's response on how we get to the weighting of that and making sure it's fair and equitable. And I'm also excited to see that, you know, possibly stormwater might, in some cases, drive what we do with the roads or other things, not always the roads driving what we do with stormwater, because we've now experienced, especially over the last couple of years, that stormwater is a major issue, and not that potholes in the road aren't a major issue either, but you know, to see maybe stormwater driving some of these issues and setting the stage, I think, is important. And certainly I appreciate the idea of these corridor plans of working together, so we're only digging up the street once, not only for convenience but cost, and getting all those working together. And again, obviously, if you have a water main break and you're digging up the road to fix the water main break, you know, and it's somewhere in the plan to fix the stormwater, then let's get in there and fix the stormwater, and we need to be flexible about that. But so I appreciate having that plan in place, so when something like that happens, we can react quickly. So appreciate the work on this, and appreciate seeing what this is going to do going forward for the whole community. Other comments?
As Commissioner Boley, I anticipate that this is a big step forward in achieving lowest cost of ownership. I mean, that's a big deal for our residents, and it's worth investing in. So thank you.
Commissioner Larson, I would echo what Commissioner Boley as well as the mayor said. This is the way you're approaching it seems to be very logical, systematic, and the idea of lumping things together so we can fix everything that's happening at that one time. I think it's great. Just getting the stormwater program off and running is something I've been begging for a few years now. So I'm really glad to see that, you know, staff is taking this and they're running with it. And then just on the first one with the Jayhawk watershed, you know, the cost to do what they're going to do, I think that's a good cost. And so kudos to you, and I appreciate what you're doing on this. Thank you.
Mayor Finkeldye, other comments or motions on 7, and then we'll follow it with 8?
Commissioner Nanda, are we doing the motions separately?
Yes.
Okay. I would move that we authorize the city manager to execute an engineering services agreement with Track Design Group, LLC, in the amount of $1,084,206 for engineering services for stormwater system ID assessment and model creation program.
Commissioner Larson, second.
Mayor Finkel, aye. There's a motion by Commissioner Ananda, a second by Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Ananda?
Aye.
Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Finkel, aye. Aye. Passes 5-0. Commissioner Ananda? I'll let you do number 8.
All right, I will move that we authorize the city manager to execute an engineering services agreement with JEO Consulting Group Incorporated in the amount of $215,645 for stormwater improvements for the Jayhawk watershed.
Commissioner Larson, second.
Mayor Finkel, aye. There's a motion by Commissioner Ananda, a second by Commissioner Lawson. Commissioner Ananda?
Aye.
Commissioner Lawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bully?
Aye.
Mayor Finkel, aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you, Nick and Matt and everyone for your work on this. Look forward to the results. Thank you very much. We'll now move to regular agenda item number 9, which is to receive the fire medical department station optimization analysis. Chief Coffey, I assume you get to kick this off.
Well, I'm going to kick it off, and since I was the only one here in 1996 when the last study was done, and then let Tom and Mackenzie take over. Tonight, before you, we're going to present our 2020 station optimization analysis. The last one was conducted in 1996 with the completion of 2006 of that plan. They did an outstanding job with that plan, I will tell you. At that point, they relocated Station 4 from where it was at on Stone Barn Terrace and Lawrence Avenue out to Wakarusa. They relocated Station 2 that was at 19th and Haskell at that time out to Harper by the water tower and the fairgrounds and built new fire station number 5. That was such a strong plan that it's been able to withstand a lot of growth within the city. And just to give you a little perspective on fire stations, by my count, looking on the internet, Lawrence is the 6th largest city in the state with about 100,000 people, give or take, and we have 5 fire stations. Topeka has 124,000 people. They have 12 fire stations. Number 7 was Shawnee, city of Shawnee, and they have 65,000 people and 4 stations. Lenexa with 56,000 people, they have 6. Manhattan has 53,800 people in their community, and they have 5 fire stations, and Salina with 46,004. So they did an outstanding job with that station location study when they did that. I will tell you though, now as we look at the upcoming presentation, you will see in that when they did it, really, if you look at 6th and Wakarusa, that area to the northwest, there was nothing in their plans that compensated for growth in that area, as well as between 6th and 15th Street, west of Wakarusa and George Williams in that area, as well as south of 31st Street. The tip of the polygon at that time for the station study was at 31st and Iowa. And so as we look at our optimization study tonight, you'll get a kind of feel for those areas as well. I want to commend Mackenzie, Zell, and Tom Fagan for the work on this analysis. They used many peers from within the community, along with City GIS. They used MSOs for support as well as Planning and Development Services, the Police Department, the Douglas County Health Department, and Douglas County. So we had many people weighing in. And I will tell you from a peer informational support part of this, many people have called requesting to see our study and the work that Mackenzie and Tom have completed. It's really innovative in the use of these other people contributing to it. So with that, I'll quit talking and turn it over to them. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Commission. My name is Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration at Fire Medical, and we're really excited about this report coming out. A lot of work, as Chief Coffey had spoke about, went into this. You may remember, some of you that were in the Commission, are on the Commission at the time, during our last accreditation site visit, back in early 2018. We had presented the outcomes of that and all the recommendations that we received from, at that time, our community risk assessment. And there were several recommendations that were talking about reliability of response performance, as well as several other recommendations that we're working towards. But that really spurred the beginning of this research. Really, that community risk assessment that was done at that time was really the tip of the iceberg. We decided to approach the city at that time for a CIP project for a station location study, have a third party do that analysis. The following year, we determined that we could do that work based on our knowledge of our community and the resources that were available based on technology and what we felt were good partnerships to build upon. And the outcome of this report is that success. And so we were able to capture that value of that CIP project to where we didn't have to spend that money. We did it internally. And I would put this report biasly, of course, against many third-party reports based on some innovation that we're really excited to talk to you about tonight. So at the top here, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, and this presentation is pretty lean and mean. I think there's 6 slides, so they're jam-packed with information. We're just, I wouldn't even say scratching the surface of this presentation tonight. There's a lot of reading, great information, and a lot of data that, frankly, we're just not going to have time to get into tonight, but we would love to talk to you more about. But I just want to recognize, again, all the people that contributed to this. We're excited about what this may spur into on potential community risk reduction initiatives, in addition to not just responding more effectively within our community, but also having more effective community engagement, identifying areas that may have specific hazards and risks that we can mitigate on the front end to prevent emergencies from occurring. And so those are some of the benefits that come from this type of collaborative work. But with that, I'll start off, and I'm not one to normally read from slides, but for the purposes of this one, I feel it's very purposeful, given the broad amount of information that's in this report. And so I am going to read these 3 project objectives because there is so much information in here. It's almost like, oh my gosh, what was other than obviously identifying the future possible locations of fire medical facilities, how did that call come in together and what was the objectives? And so that, with that said, I'll go ahead and read our first objective here. To analyze the department's station location capabilities relative to key community risk factors, including but not limited to population density, disadvantaged populations, assessed property value, future population projections, and historical response fire medical department performance. And so what's interesting about those 5 different dimensions of risk, and we'll talk more about that here in just a moment, is only one of those is specific to fire medical data. And so when we talk about using bigger data, more community intelligence to make these future planning decisions, we felt like that was a success with this analysis. So the number 2 objective, using key community risk factors, data modeling, and modern mapping technology, identify strategic locations to provide emergency travel time capability based on industry best practice standards. And so if you remember just a few weeks ago, we presented you the annual compliance report. And in that report, we talked about our baseline response time performance and what that trend has looked like historically and how we're seeing an elongation of our travel time. We also talked about alarm handling and turnout time. But this specific report is based on the ability to move from location A to location B in a performance level that's consistent with quality standards. So the third and last one here, and then we'll move on to the next slide, is provide a data-informed recommendation for the adaptation fire medical response capability through station relocation expansion for improved community-wide value, more equitable service levels, higher quality of life for all residents and visitors, and improved outcomes to lives and property. And so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next slide. Okay, so we'll start looking at the map before we get into the 5 dimensions of risk. And one thing you may recognize when you're going through the report is all the maps are standardized with consistent coloring and shading. And I just want to kind of orientate you to this map and how it is also going to connect to the next few slides. So obviously this is a map of the city of Lawrence. You're seeing the 5 fire medical stations that exist currently within the city. We do have boundaries within the city as it exists currently with a gray shaded outline. And then we also have 2030 projections and 2040 projections for growth based on the city's 2030 and 2040 plans. The green shaded area, and you may have recognized this from a slide that we had in our presentation just a few weeks ago, is our ability to respond in travel time from each one of our fire medical stations. And just to remember that that's based on the availability of those resources within that station, the perfect sunny day, no weather, ice on the roads, right? And no other calls happening. And as we talked about in that presentation a few weeks ago, we run between 35 and 45 calls per day, majority of those requiring more than just one resource to respond and mitigate. And so these red ovals that you're seeing here are geographical gaps in coverage based on our ability or capability to provide that quality standard response performance of 4 minutes travel time from each one of our stations. And so we're going to dig further into this tonight. Previously, we had shown you these circles. Tonight and in the report, you're going to see a lot more detail about what exists risk-wise within these different geographical gap areas, as we call it in the report. And we're evaluating 5 different dimensions of risk. The first one being disadvantaged populations based on a Lawrence Douglas County MPO data layer. Again, using a very broad approach to data collection. We aren't just using our data. And this is some information that we're really looking forward to see how we can elevate equity and coverage across the city. And we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes. Number 2, the current City of Lawrence population, which came from the City of Lawrence Planning and Development Services. The projected City of Lawrence population in 2040, which again was from the City of Lawrence Planning and Development Services. Appraised building value was from the Douglas County Appraiser's Office. And then lastly, our historical density of call volume based on our data sets. So with that, Mackenzie will go to the next slide. And so Mackenzie Ezell is going to talk about these next 3 slides, and then each one of these we're going to get into the further detail of these geographical gap areas.
Hello, Mackenzie Ezell, Fire Medical Analyst. So we're going to look at, like Chief Fagan said, 3 slides that look very similar to this. We're going to go through each of the 3 gaps that were on that first map. So for the first one, we have our north gap. And so if we look at the map on the left, we can see that green blanket of coverage that we've talked to you guys about. And then we can see the oval, which is where we've designated that gap. Within that oval, we have 2 colors of dots. We have red dots and we have navy dots. The navy dots are where we hit our performance travel time response goal. And then the red is when we did not meet that goal. So realistically, even when we have the coverage of the 4-minute travel time within that green blanket, we can still see that we haven't been able to reach that goal every single time. And this data is 2013 through 2019 emergency data. That way we can see that we are analyzing data that we are responding emergent to, so getting there as quickly as possible. So we can also see Station 3 is in the bottom corner of the map. And then we can compare this later on to the population growth and those other dimensions that we talked about earlier. So if we look to the right, those dots in the red and the blue are broken down into 3 segments: the 4 minutes or less, the 4 to 6 minutes, and the above 6 minutes in travel time. So the navy dots correlate with the 4 minutes or less, which in this oval was met 34% of the time. Everything red would be in the 4 to 6 minutes or above 6 minutes. If we look below that, we can see some key facts that involve what is in this oval. So that is covered covered by the green blanket right now, and then also not covered by the green blanket, anything in that oval. And so we can see the population, the unemployment rate, the number of households, how many schools, parks, total businesses there are, how many employees go there during the day, households with disability, households without a vehicle, and then that age breakup for that population. And so that's our north goal. We're going to move on to our next, north gap. We're going to move on to our next gap, which is the northwest gap. And so the same layout with this map, we can see those two different colored dots, shows us our response actuals. And so you can also see with this map specifically that we do have some navy dots that are outside of that green coverage area, that blanket, that we have been able to get there in less than 4 minutes. And so that can be for a variety of reasons. Maybe it really was the perfect scenario and our apparatus were able to get there and respond quickly. Maybe our apparatus were close by that area when the call came out and they were able to respond from that location. So that kind of varies throughout the different situations. And then again, key facts, we can see the population, the employee information, and then also households with disability. And the last gap area is the south gap. And so this south gap, same thing. We have our two colored dots, the response performance, how that lays out, and then the key facts that come from the American Community Survey from the census data. And I do want to add in the key facts that we are polling are also using the Esri technology that was used for the mapping and the station location study and formulating that green blanket.
And Kinsey, I'm going to step in and add just a little bit back to that slide. This is Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration. I just wanted to take a moment as we talked about that green blanket or that standards of cover capability that we have. That's being developed based on a software tool in Esri ArcGIS. So the way that that is determined is that they are using a software program based on the roadway network and how that system currently exists to show a simulation of what the computer believes we should be able to reach in distance wise at 4 minutes. Because this is a computer generated simulation, I just wanted to touch on the fact that it appears to be, I would say, fairly accurate based on the observations of historical performance. And I think this slide is pretty indicative of that. You can see where the blue dots are in relation to the red dots within that green shaded area. And so because that is a simulation of what capability there is, I think it reinforces the credibility of using that tool. And that's just a good observation to reinforce the science and research behind this work. And again, our appreciation to the great support of City IT and GIS personnel who we could not do this without. So just wanted to take an opportunity to plug them and what we believe to be a very effective tool to do this analysis. Thanks, Mackenzie. Okay, so what are we recommending here? First of all, I want to encourage you to dig in to the 8 different scenarios. And this is Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration. Again, I apologize. We took 8 different scenarios from a zero cost approach to if we were to not expand in our operational coverage, but just potentially relocate resources, how effective could we be in addressing these gap areas? And so several scenarios were worked through that lean to full coverage options. And the 8th one is where we found that we were able to address the 3 of these gaps. And that resulted in the relocation of Fire Medical Station number 3, just a little bit to the north and east, an expansion station in the northwest, which you see there is represented as a star, as is the one in the north central there. And then an additional expansion station to the south, just south of Station 5. And so you'll see some black dots around each one of those stars. And they aren't, the imagery isn't included in this presentation, but within the report, there were 69 candidate locations that we evaluated really just at random in order to really identify a centroid of risk. And when I say a centroid of risk, if you remember those 5 dimensions of risk that we talked about earlier. And so weighing each one of those out based on density of risk, this is the recommendation using those 5 categories of risk in order to effectively provide that enhanced coverage. And so in that map, you'll see a darker shade of green, which is the coverage that's gained. We also do have a little bit of coverage that's lost at 4 minutes, but that doesn't mean that they won't receive people and property in those locations. It doesn't mean that they would not receive the potential of 4-minute response times or even longer, but it'd be somewhere close to 4 minutes. But you can see the impact here. I would also add that the roadway expansion and coverage is limited by the existing roadway infrastructure. And so when we look at some of these geographical gap areas, even beyond the city's existing boundaries, as the city builds additional infrastructure, that footprint will likely grow somewhat with that additional infrastructure and roadway. That green, darker shade of green is limited by the existing roadway infrastructure that exists. And so with that, we'll talk about the value gained. And this is exciting to identify as far as a value gained with this improved response coverage within having the capability within 4 minutes. There are just over 3,700 households, 8,800 in population, 161 businesses, over $1 billion in property value, 490 households with a disability, 5 households without a vehicle, and over 2,500 employees. And I would add that all of these data points are based on our research that began in 2019. And so that being said, it's already a little dated. This is going to continue to evolve, and it likely has even since this research began. And then covering the value lost, again, this would be evolving as well, at least within the 4 minutes travel time coverage, 267 households, 605 population, 3 businesses, 127 million, and then 30 households with a disability, 0 households without a vehicle, and then 18 employees. And I want to thank you all for your time tonight. Like we said, this presentation isn't even really scratching the surface. Initially, we had reached out to several of our partners that contributed data to this research to be available tonight. But based on the agenda, we thought it was going to be really, really late. So if there's technical questions that we can't answer tonight, we definitely have some subject matter experts that we can reference later to try to get those questions answered for you. But with that, we're open for your questions.
Mayor Finkeldei, questions?
Vice Mayor Shipley, in your response gap areas, the north, the northwest, and the south gap, I don't see it specifically on your graph, which is fantastic, by the way. Thank you, everyone. These are incredible. Like the south gap, for example, looks like the number of incidents during that time is significantly larger than, say, the northwest gap. So in as much as that might affect the way I look at all the other options you showed us in the packet, I wonder if you think that matters.
Of course. Thank you for that. I want to make sure I answer your question. As far as the count of incidents, we have numerous different types of risk categories and classes, right? So we talk about fire, EMS, hazmat, and rescue. We do have density of call volume in what we call Planning Zone 5, which is in District 5 there, just south of Fire Station 5. There's also some, I would say, correlation with other data that we classify as miscellaneous risk within the report. And so it's definitely a gap area that we want to address our response performance to. One of the observations that we took is that not only is it a what we would call or describe a distribution response time challenge, but a reliability response time challenge based on the call density, not only there in Planning Zone 5, but also in Planning Zone 1 and 3. And so we have a slide that shows historical reliability on how often we're meeting the benchmarks within Planning Zone 3 and 5 overarchingly. And those two planning zones are where we're not comparatively arriving just in a global sense and quality standards performance. So I would agree that there is a concentration of calls in that area. If you look, we should be providing or should be capable of providing 4-minute response time coverage. We're hoping to see some improvements with that based on some of our organizational improvement efforts. I'll go ahead and plug our new station deployment model we're hoping to roll out next year. In fact, we will be with an engine providing first due performance and then the rescue tiller. We should see some, I'm hoping to see some improvement and reliable response time performance, but that will be tempered based on historically increasing call demand. And so we're not sure exactly what that impact looks like, but we are optimistic that we should see some increased reliable performance within Planning Zone 5. But frankly, there are some areas within that planning zone that we just aren't able to get to just based on pure capability, and then compounded by reliability challenges.
Mackenzie Ezel, biomedical analyst. I will also add to that answer. There might be more incidents that have happened in that area. And so that is not something that we're unfamiliar with by any means. But again, relative to growth in the last few years, because the data set was 2013 to 2019.
Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration. Call demand being just one of the risk factors that we looked at. Remember, we talked about 5 different risk dimensions, but historical LDCFM demand was one of them that was considered in the resource allocation tool used by ArcGIS.
Mayor Finkel, other questions? I'll jump in. First, I just want to confirm what you said early on, Chief Fagan, that that this is just drive time, basically. We talked a couple weeks ago about dispatch and some issues there, and this doesn't include those sorts of issues, correct?
That's correct. We looked at total response time in that presentation a few weeks ago. And so just a reminder, total response time is the sum of alarm handling. So when someone calls 911, the dispatcher answers the phone, and there's a segment of time before they notify fire medical responders. Once they're notified, alarm handling begins, which is another segment of time. And they are notified and begin moving towards their vehicles to respond. We call that turnout time. And then as soon as their wheels start turning is where travel time begins. And that is where they are moving from location A to location B for the emergency. And so talk about the things that are influencing each one of those segments of time. And we had shown you that chart from a few weeks ago on performance relative to quality practice standards. And we can bring that slide up again this evening if you would like to see that again. But we have consistently seen an elongation since our performance back in 2008 to where on several risk levels, including structure fires, we're now, I believe, 6 minutes and 20 seconds on high-risk fires, which are structure fires with flames showing travel time against a quality practice standard of 4 minutes. we're still always working on technology improvements. Turnout time-wise, we're fairly close, although there's always room for improvement, and we're always striving for that. We're currently working with our partners in the Emergency Communications Center to continue to improve in alarm handling. But the elongation in travel time is not something that we can make up based on historical demand. When I say demand, emergency demand and non-emergency demand. We respond to emergency incidents. Our operational crews also go out in the community and perform over 5,000 business inspections a year. They're also moving throughout the community to do other logistical assignments and perform public education in addition to training requirements by ISO, in addition to their EMS certification training. And so all of those things impact the availability and the location of the units to provide that quality response performance from each one of those locations. And so over time, increasing demand and responsibility on those emergency service units is impacting their ability to provide that emergency travel time.
Mayor Finkelstein, thank you. That helps. As I read this report, and I certainly need to continue to study it, I mean, certainly the relocation of Station 3 to the north and a station out west jumped out at me. I guess looking at the report before I started, or just some of the, the green areas and distances, the one, the south area didn't seem like it was going to be as big of a problem as it is. Is that, I mean, distance-wise, it doesn't look like, is it the traffic? Is it getting through those stoplights? Is it, what's causing that travel time? I mean, again, given the distance, I mean, I'm just trying to wonder if there's some other option, well, not some other option, some other explanation there.
Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration. That wasn't something that was really on our radar either. In fact, it was one of those things that we just found by peeling back layers of the onion, so to speak, and diving into the data as an observation of a gap. And so based on that, we're hopeful, as we're always looking to continuously improve as an organization, that we can continue to chip away and try to improve reliability, but that always is going to be tempered by evolving demands for service on the operations division and those resources to respond within the community. Because if you look at the travel time capability, again, looking at what would be a credible tool, which we believe it to be, we should be able to provide more effective or more predictably reliable service at that quality standard level within that area. So the bottom line is, as far as the exact root cause, I can't tell you what exactly it is, other than historically we have been able to provide service at a higher level across the city. And based on our increasing demand of services across the board, it's continuing to erode away our travel time performance within the city. I think there's additional population, there's additional traffic. Streetlights, we've incorporated technology solutions to help us with that. GPS preemption systems, when we have our emergency warning signals on, it turns lights green in our path of travel to not only ease the roadway for us, but also vehicles that may be in front of us to allow them to move out of our pathway. We also are utilizing what's called AVL, or automatic vehicle location systems, which makes sure that we are sending the closest units to these calls. And so when you look at historically how we would have responded, it just would have been, well, you're in this area, we know that this station is normally here, we're just going to assign that station. That's prior to AVL technology. So we're leveraging more and more technology all the time, trying to maximize and leverage that to make us as fast as possible. But we still are experiencing elongated travel times.
Mayor Figler, I appreciate that. I mean, you do think about, again, this is the novice speaking. I mean, Fire Station 5 does seem hard to get out of and around, and then down to Iowa, I could see losing quite compared to some of the other stations where you're out on Wakarusa, you're out right on 6th Street, in the first 10 seconds. It probably takes you a little time to get out over to Iowa and going south, and then experiencing probably 23rd and Iowa traffic makes it hard to get south. But anyway, I know those are things you're working on. I just seems like I could see that being an issue. And I guess another novice question here related to some of these, especially on the southern end, is there any, what's the word I'm looking for, any ability or any cooperation, for example, with, the Wakarusa Fire Department having their location, a big, right there on the south end there on 31st, about any ability, to have them respond more quickly, or co-location in their location, or anything like that, that there's any sort of overlap we could use to, to bridge the gap as we move forward towards, eventually building this, even under your plan, not till 2027.
Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration. Before I take a shot at that one, Chief Coffey, did you have comments on that?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Sean Coffey, Fire Chief. I will tell you, Mayor Finkeldine, we have a strong working relationship with what is now the Douglas County Consolidated Fire District #1. And they actually are within the city there at 31st and Louisiana, and we actually perform fire prevention inspections of their location. But I will tell you, they have a little bit different deployment model, and we do rely on them when we have large scale events for mutual aid. They're able to call back some of their volunteers and get them into the stations. And we have used them to fill our stations for mutual aid when we're calling in units from Johnson County to staff our stations when we have several large scale events happening at the same time. So we do use them as a resource, but unfortunately, particularly for fires, they have one person assigned to their station full time. And so as we look at our fire model, having one person show up on a structure fire doesn't meet what we need for fire suppression efforts. And where we run 4 people per NFPA 1710, they only have one volunteer, and then they rely on others to respond to the scene.
Mayor Finkeldine, yeah, I guess maybe I didn't ask that question very well. I was thinking more like, different idea, but I know in Johnson County, I think, it's you have a co-location of the Johnson County Medical in different fire stations. I mean, is it possible to put a truck there with 3 people, add an extension on there, some lower cost version to get some scale of having maybe a location there, or some co-location or something like that? Just curious, not.
I will tell you, Mayor Finkeldine, that's an interesting concept that we have not thought of before. And so that would be something we could definitely do some investigation on.
Just a thought on being able to get something quicker located, maybe a truck or something there. Again, not saying we don't eventually need that, but in the short run, maybe having some capability.
We do have a similar agreement, Sean Coffey, Fire Chief. We have a similar agreement with the city of Eudora, where we locate one of the ambulances in the Eudora City Fire Department. So there is some history related to that type of agreement.
Mayor Finkeldine, thank you. Other questions before I open it to public comment?
Yeah, Commissioner Rush, I got a question to Sean, I guess, whoever wants to answer this, and that is over time, over at least the last 10 years, we've seen the number of fire calls to be extremely consistent at about 2,000 a year, with the exception of 2019, where it was 191. But what we've also seen is the medical calls are the ones that continue to increase in volume over time. So would it behoove us to look at the possibility that we need more medical units and just more, maybe a medical facility? Or do these always have to be built together?
And Tom, do you want to comment on the data part of it?
Yes, Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration. Thank you, Commissioner Larson. So that expansion of demand for EMS services isn't something that's unique to our community. That's something that societally, the United States is facing, is an increase of demand on emergency medical services. But one thing that we're proud of is our ability to co-respond. It's in our name, Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical. And so within the city of Lawrence, the fire medical department not only provides the ambulance service, but also the first responder performance as well. All of our firefighters are advanced EMTs and paramedics. And so very frequently, our ambulances may be out of the county on transports into the Kansas City area or Topeka. And so that demand on first response falls upon our fire apparatus to provide that response performance to where they can begin quality care while they're awaiting the arrival of the ambulance. And so although we are seeing that increase in medical demand, and one of the things that we're working towards through our budgetary process is trying to get towards more community risk reduction, getting to the root cause of what's causing ongoing requests for EMS. Digging into the data, we've seen frequent requests for service at the same location within the city of Lawrence for EMS services. And so getting to the root cause and providing those resources to really address their needs when really they may not necessarily need an ambulance is something that we continue to work through through other channels within Douglas County and the hospital system to really try to address that need. But that's something that's an ongoing, I would say, a public health issue that we are involved in, and we are working with our partners to try to help temper that. But that is something that we are seeing in Lawrence and Douglas County, and it is a part of our service. But in regards to trying to address response performance based on the increasing demand of EMS, when we look at risk in those 5 different dimensions, and population density, and looking at risk where it exists, and not necessarily just historical demand, will help ensure that we have a predictably high-performing organization that has the capabilities to provide that quality level of service, not just based on historical data of demand concentration, but making sure that we're positioned to provide a quality of service where the risk exists within our city.
Mr. Larson, thank you.
Mayor Finkeldine, seeing no questions at the moment, I'll go ahead and open this to public comment. If any member of the public would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, or if you're present at City Hall, let Sherry know.
Chris Flowers.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers, and I was just looking at the map of the, I guess, gap in the southern part, and it looks like a lot of the red dots are around the Easy Living mobile home. And I don't know what the cities, like the emergencies, like GPS systems are like, but just if you use Google Maps, I don't think it shows the lot numbers. If you type in the address, it just takes you to the trailer park. And I'm just wondering, does the city have like maps of the actual lots when it comes to trailer parks, or do they just know like it's at Easy Living, lot such and such, and then they have to find it without using a map? Because if we had like a map, it'd be a lot easier. Just from delivering, that can be confusing, because there's a few blocks where it just it goes a little bit wonky. And also I think we have pretty good firefighters, but like, what are the out the door times? Like, I don't know if that's what it's called for you guys, but for delivery drivers, like where I work, it's called out the door time, like from when the call comes in till when you're out the door. Like, what if the reason for some of these red dots is that whatever fire station is taking care of this area, what if they're not out of the door from the moment, like once they get the dispatch till when they're actually out the door? Are they as fast as the other fire stations? Like, do we have any kind of like out the door times to compare all the other stations to? But I don't really know. That's just something I'd be asking just in case. I mean, a lot of red dots could be an indicator of maybe that station's a little bit weaker than the others. But I think our firefighters seem like they're pretty capable, so I don't think that's the case. But it's just something I'd be asking. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on this item? That's all the comments, Mayor.
Mayor Finkel, thank you, Sherry. Bring it back to the commission. I know we did talk about out the door time, I guess, as Chris talked about earlier, but can you address the question on, there were all quite a few dots at the mobile home park there. Just any comments about locating and travel time within that park?
Yes, Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration. We use mobile data computers in all of our first responding units that have mapping technology in them, and they receive information from the computer-aided dispatch center or the CAD, which is located within the Emergency Communications Center. So part of that call vetting process that occurs at the dispatch center is making sure that we have precise locations of where the emergency occurs. They also want to make sure that they have a contact number in case there's a disconnection or there is any challenges associated with locating the request for services. And I would say there's always opportunities for improvement in our CAD system, but that system is designed to make sure that we have precise locations and using mapping technology down to the lot number within trailer parks and apartment buildings and all of the different risk areas within the city. We're always working towards trying to update that, and we work with City GIS to update our map books. We also use map books within our trucks to assist with that on the finer details of those types of areas. And so, yes, we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we can provide a as fast as response performance as possible. In regards to out the door times, we are working towards the best practice standards there. I believe, and I don't know, Mackenzie, if you had that slide close by, we were going to pull that up here just to show you comparably where we've been. And this slide may look familiar from our last presentation here just a few weeks ago, but looking at a historical trend line of performance, when we look at, again, those three segments of time, the first one being alarm handling, and that is the red line relative to the benchmark. And we're working on that with some process improvement with our partners in the communications center. And then looking at turnout time, you can see in 2018, we were beating the benchmark, and we've had a little bit of fluctuations on that. There are several things that influence that. And we're continuing to communicate with our crews to make sure that they're aware of their performance. And we even have the shot clock timers in our apparatus bays now to make sure that they're able to see that countdown clock to make sure that as they're putting their gear on, they're able to see the clock ticking. And that is the yellow shaded area there. The dotted line is the benchmark. And then the solid line is our historical performance based on the best practice standard. And then the last segment is that travel time. The dotted line, again, consistently just in the formatting of the graph here is the benchmark. And then our historical trending performance based on overtime changes within the system, increasing call volumes, increasing non-emergency tasks. Other factors such as community development also influence our ability to move throughout the community as well. Thanks, Mackenzie.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Sean Coffey, Fire Chief. Mackenzie, could you talk a little bit real quick about the Esri dashboard we're working with the county IT to get up as it relates to turnout time?
Yeah, so we are currently working on a project with Esri And we are working on getting dashboards that will be displayed throughout the stations and in admin. And that dashboard will show a variety of metrics based on that specific location, or we can do department-wide metrics. And so those metrics might include how those crews are doing with their turnout time relative to the benchmark. So we're picturing gauges so that they can see their actual performance, and then also kind of make it a competitive edge that crews and stations can work and see how each other are doing and kind of uphold each other to that standard. And then it also just creates awareness. On that dashboard, we're hoping to have a map that shows the incidents that are currently happening, our available apparatus, our apparatus that are out of service, whether they're on a transfer, a part of a training, those types of things. And so it'll just increase awareness overall for the entire department of the metrics, what's going on right now with real-time data.
Mayor Finkelai, that sounds cool. I like that. Okay, other questions or comments? It looks like our action is to receive the report and I guess it's to receive the report. But what's the next step? I'll ask that question. Where do you see we go from here?
The next step for us is we'll start working through our normal budgetary process and through the capital improvement process to see about implementing different parts of this analysis.
I thank you on that. Okay, comments, questions? I guess I'm not sure we need any action since it's to receive it, and we have now received it. Sherry, am I correct on that?
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Finkelai, thank you. Okay, and if there's no further comments, thank you very much, everyone. A great presentation, and look forward to seeing more of that work going forward. Okay, that takes us to commission items. Any commissioners have any commission items?
Vice Mayor Shipley, I'm sorry I've been sitting on this for a while because we've had so many long meetings. One of the things I'd like to see us do, and we've mentioned it very little in the past, is doing perhaps a land acknowledgement for the indigenous people that were here in Lawrence before we were Lawrence. And a group I think makes sense to kind of dig into that work would be the Human Resources Commission. I would like to see when I've tried to do research on my own to get a list of all of the indigenous people and their histories in this area, I've had a hard time. I've seen different lists. So I feel like someone needs to kind of parse through some history there. And of course, we could just hand it to staff. We have very capable, at least 2 very capable staff members, one who might even have some very good experience with it. But I think it's really important for the public to be involved in it, for it to be a public engagement kind of aspect of it. And it seems like giving it to one of our volunteer boards is a good space for them. And for the public to engage in that discussion. So I didn't know if anyone else was interested in that. I would just also specify in that research, I would hope to kind of see the little bit of history of the groups, the tribes that were here. There's at least 2 different kind of groups that were here historically, and tribes that were pushed here by settlers in the East Coast moving towards the Midwest. And so it seems like knowing a little bit about that history is really important for our community. To me, I would like every kid I stop on the street to be able to name 3 tribes that were here. Well, you know, so kids to start learning about that in school, for us to get that information to schools when they're doing units on the indigenous people of the area. So I didn't know if I had, maybe anyone else thought that was a good place to start for that. Obviously not an emergency, not taking up a lot of staff time, hopefully, since we've laid quite a lot on them recently. That's kind of another reason I thought one of our volunteer boards would be a good place to start.
This is Commissioner Ananda. I'm familiar with land acknowledgements. I think that they are helpful in centering, and I don't know what you saw this as, if it was something that we would say at the beginning of every meeting or that would be at the top of every agenda. Did you have some thoughts on that, Courtney?
Vice Mayor Shipley, yeah, that might be someplace we go with it in the future. I think this would be something that I would hope would take a few months of engagement and education. But also a thing I would like to see as we, well, 2 things. As we hope to grow our relationship with the Kaw Nation, I would want us to reach out to the other nations and have some relationship or discussion with them also. And then if it were me and I had a magic wand, I would, you know, we have sister city signs at the entrances of our city at all the major gateways. I would also have a sign that acknowledged all of the tribes that were in this area, whose history we know about and we're trying to cultivate relationships with. So those are 3 things I think I would do with that information. Besides hopefully sharing it with schools and the public, and finding ways to be informational about it throughout the community.
This is Commissioner Ananda. I really appreciate that idea. And I think that I don't know about the Human Rights Commission necessarily, whether or not this would be a project that would be something brought to us by the Indigenous community, you know, not pulling that and taking it for our own, and whether or not there's a way to partner with an organization or a group or even an individual for whom this is highly personal and something that may already be done. So I would say that yes, but also where do we start? I don't know that it's at the HRC, or if it's, you know, having staff come back with a recommendation on moving forward with that.
Vice Mayor Shipley, I appreciate that comment. I also want to say we should have to do some of that work. So I appreciate what you're saying. Of course, I would hope that whoever this is appropriate to task with would reach out to all kinds of partners, obviously. But I also think it's our responsibility to do some work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, though, that it's a matter of getting permission and a request versus this is our great idea for making things better or whatever. And so you're absolutely right. The work is ours to do. The permission and the information is not ours to collect necessarily. So you're right. It is 100% all of those things.
Mayor Finkel, I would just add, you know, when we get to that point, I know my daughter is doing a lot of college research, and almost every college she looks at on the front page or very close to the front page, they have land acknowledgements on it, and that's impressed her. And I think that's, you know, again, on our city website, you know, amongst other locations, to make sure that that's there.
Vice Mayor Shipley, I'm not, hold on, let me look, see who else on here. I don't know if Dr. Muhammad is on here. I'm also assuming Tony's here. She has a little bit of knowledge about this. If either one of them has any recommendation or feeling how we could move forward appropriately.
The city manager, Craig Owens, I'm happy to jump in on this. If we could just have a meeting or so to come up with some ideas and share those maybe next week, we'd appreciate that time.
Yes, I apologize. This is Tony Wheeler, city attorney. I was having a problem with my computer turning the video on. But yes, we could be prepared to come back next week. I can tell you in the conversations that we've had with the Kaw Nation about Injuje Wahobe, they are interested in, I think they're interested in this concept as well. But I think the commission makes a good point. There were other Native peoples that occupied this land, and making sure that we include all relevant tribes would be important. So.
Commissioner Shipley, think that's a good step moving forward? Vice Mayor Shipley, sorry. Okay, other commission items? If not, takes us to the city manager's report.
City manager, Craig Owens, really only one item on there, and that is the sales tax report. I've asked Jeremy Wilmoth to only give us those kinds of reports in the future. Very positive, but we're obviously we are monitoring to see if it really is a trend or if there's some reporting difference, but it was absolutely good news. Otherwise, we have questions on anything. We've got upcoming agenda items on there as well.
Mayor Finkel, looking at the future agenda items, we had a brief discussion a week or so ago about an interest in the right-of-way program and learn a little bit more about, we had a couple speakers, and I don't know if that's a full-fledged agenda item or some report on that, but just didn't see that on the future agenda item, so I wanted to throw that out there.
Okay.
Commissioner Larson, I had an item for the agenda, or at least a question about an item that we don't see on the agenda, the future agenda items. Craig, do you have any idea when we're going to see that fire med agreement?
The city manager, Craig Owens, I'm sorry, it should have been on there. We have it scheduled for next week. I believe the county is planning to take it up the day after.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Finkel, this is a public hearing item. If any member of the public would like to speak on those two items, please raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, and Sherry will call upon you.
Chris Flowers.
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. I just have a quick one, I guess. I didn't see on the upcoming agenda items, when are you guys going to be accepting like the results of the government study task force and deciding on that stuff? It just seems like if there's going to be a deadline, that might be something that's going to take more than 1 or 2 meetings. It seems like there's a lot to discuss with that. Thank you.
There's no more comment on that item, Mayor.
Mayor Finkel, thank you. Bring it back to the commission. I think Chris brings up a good point. Do we have a date yet when we'll receive that report from the committee? The government task force,
Oh, forgive me.
When Dr. Nalbandian can come?
City Manager Craig Owens, we're working on scheduling that. The work is done, and it's sometime this month. So I know that we were discussing when the availability would be. So we'll be getting it on this month. It may be as soon as next week, but probably a little bit further down the road.
Thanks, Mayor. Vice Mayor Shipley. I'm not sure even Chris Flowers didn't ask this question somewhere. Is it possible to put their recommendation out on Lawrence Listens in the in-between time and see if we get any feedback from the public, since maybe hasn't gotten quite as much engagement as had it not been during COVID?
This is City Manager Craig Owens. We certainly can. I think we should design and talk about how do you want to receive input. I mean, that is one piece, and it goes back to the previous agenda item. We really need to be intentional about what our expectations are for our public engagement so that we can offer kind of a promise for what that will look like, and they can understand what we will do with the input that we receive. We haven't had that conversation with the commission, so there certainly would be public hearings to see where we would go with this. There's work that has to be done between now and if we were to put it on the ballot. So I think all those things would be right for a conversation when we post this, but we certainly will be ready to talk about that.
Mayor Finkelstein, any other questions on the city manager's report? If not, that brings us to the calendar. Any comments on the calendar? I would note, and I assume all the commissioners have heard about it at least, if not gotten information on it. You know, the chamber, along with the Topeka Chamber, is looking to go to Northwest Arkansas, October, whatever it is, 6th, 7th, and 8th or something. I think it's 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so I think their intent is to invite all the commissioners. So we probably need to put that on the calendar, whether or not we all go and how we deal with that. We'll need to talk about. But I know Chad Lawhorn's planning to go as well, so we might be able to cover some of that, but probably need to put that on the calendar, at least as a heads up.
This is Commissioner Ananda. Commissioner Larson is taking the the August 5th ribbon cutting. Is that the right one, Commissioner Larson?
Okay. Yeah, correct. Commissioner Larson, correct.
Okay, anything else for the calendar? Mayor Finkelstein? If not, I'll look for a motion to adjourn and say that Commissioner Bowley's reverse psychology worked, so maybe he can either make or second the motion.
Move to adjourn. Commissioner Larson, move to adjourn.
Commissioner Bowley, second.
Mayor Finkelstein, we have a motion by Commissioner Larson, a second by Commissioner Bowley. Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Aye.
Commissioner Nanda?
Aye.
Mayor Finkelstein, aye. Passes 5-0. We will see you soon next week. Thanks.